Imagine the whole world thinks you're a villain, but what if you're just a victim of circumstance? He's not a hero, he's not a villain, but why is everyone afraid of him? What is this mysterious swordsman hiding? Let's find out. The story begins with the first meeting of the protagonist, Cain von Euclid, with his grandfather, Reinhard von Euclid, the founder of the United States on the first continent. The protagonist will never forget their first meeting. Reinhard declared to his grandson that he would become an extraordinary villain. All the continents of this world would fall at his feet. MC thought that he had already killed him more than once. However, it was impossible to change what was destined. He suffered countless defeats, and, having seen the end of this world, he experienced despair more than once, so he decided to become even more ruthless. Reinhard said that in the end, on the day he was born, he found hope. He turned to his grandson, handing him an artifact that he should follow him, since fate cannot be avoided and cannot be changed in any way. However, he will make a real man out of him. The protagonist and his grandfather set off on a 13-year journey. He remembers every second of this difficult journey with crystal clarity. After some time on the fourth continent, where the art of war is valued, Kurogami Makoru, the black wolf demon, shouted, "Will they fight or leave the girl with him?" The captive shouted that she was asking them to help her. She has a small child. Toinko, originally from Segumon, shouted, while his men doubted their victory, "How can he not be ashamed to take a woman hostage?" Kurogami declared that he can talk whatever he wants, but the life of this woman is in his hands. Suddenly, the protagonist asked, "Is this what they call him, the black wolf demon?" Kurogami shouted, "Who is here?" The protagonist noted that he is completely mired in evil. MC delivered a crushing blow that finishes off the criminal along with the victim, and then kills one of Toinko's men. Toinko pounces on the protagonist with a weapon, but the protagonist deflects the blow with a swing of his sword. The protagonist stated that the hostage was his message. Toinko's allies freeze in shock, holding their guns to the protagonist's throat. The MC said that the man he just killed was also their accomplice. Toinko shouted that this couldn't be. The protagonist stated that they would be able to find proof in his wallet, a sign that he belonged to the dark amulets. Toinko said upon finding this amulet that he couldn't believe it. Since when did he betray them? He then said, bowing to the protagonist, that he thanked him for his help. The protagonist said that he only did what he had to. Toinko asked how he knew that they belonged to the dark amulets. The MC stated that it wasn't about who they were. He only got rid of evil. Sometime later in the tavern, Reinhardt said, turning to his grandson, that he had defeated evil and saved the pious people. He can be proud of himself. However, how did he know that the woman he killed and the warrior were in cahoots? What would he do if it turned out that she was innocent? Did he not have any doubts that he was killing an innocent person? The protagonist said that he was sure that she was not a hostage. Reinhardt asked how he could be so sure of that. The protagonist noted that he himself gave him the pendant, which allowed him to see the truth. Reinhardt asked, so the sacred circle was in his possession all this time? The protagonist asked in surprise, could this item really be the sacred circle, which is the relic of the third continent? Did he seriously steal it? However, he always forbade his grandson from committing evil deeds, and yet he did it himself. Reinhardt said that he had no choice. They had already tried to change his fate many times. MC asked, so when he stole the treasure of the second continent, he had no choice either? And the peaches from purgatory? And there was also a seabed relic, right? Reinhardt shouted that he had to stop. Let him tell him. Does the sacred circle really allow him to distinguish between good and evil? The protagonist noted that he felt the evil swallowing up the three of them. He killed them when he realized that they were villains with no chance of correction. Reinhardt declared that the sacred circle had recognized him. Finally, his divine punishment star was freed from the shackles of its predetermined fate. He could afford to remain neutral. The protagonist thought that they had spent 13 years together with their grandfather, and he still could not understand his thoughts. Reinhardt noted that he could not bother his head. After all, as the saying goes, ignorance is bliss. The protagonist asked if this was really true. Reinhardt noted that he had a body like a wild animal. The protagonist asked if this was really a compliment. Reinhardt shouted that he could interpret it as he wanted. Night fell in the hotel room. Reinhardt said that he would no longer limit him, he should live as he pleases. The protagonist noted that he wants to repay good with kindness, and boundless evil with evil. He will live freely, without stepping beyond what his grandfather taught him. Reinhardt said that his words give him peace. Morning came. The protagonist found a letter from his grandfather, in which he wrote that their journey together ends here. He must go through life, not paying attention to his fate. In the end, he wants to say only one thing. No matter what anyone tells him, he is not a villain. P.S. In the depths of the continent he must find a blacksmith named Kale, who will help him on his journey. After some time, the protagonist made a crushing blow to the enemy, and then blocked the enemy's blow. People from the Dark Amulets shouted that he dared to insult them. The protagonist, with sharp movements, destroyed his enemies with sword blows. The protagonist thought, has this sword already broken? This sword could not hold out for long. Suddenly, reinforcements from the Dark Amulets arrived, which the protagonist destroyed with the broken sword, and then punched the last one. A member of the Dark Amulets shouted that he should listen to him. The protagonist noted that it is very difficult to knock someone down without killing them. A member of the Dark Amulets curled up on the ground and said that he does not know anything. MC noted that he knows this. A member of the Dark Amulets shouted, then why did he leave him alive? The protagonist thought that his Sacred Circle artifact glowed white. The protagonist said that he was leaving him alive because he was able to start a new life. He himself should go to prison, repent properly, and start a righteous life. MC thought, picking up the weapon from the ground, that this sword is quite good. He believes that this weapon can last a long time. Then he noticed a huge snow-white glow from the side of the castle roof. The protagonist thought that he had seen this before with his grandfather. There was a good man there. The protagonist said, looking at the roof of the castle, that he should not let him down. At this time, Gitai Mei on the roof said that he was worried when he heard rumors about a young man under 20 years old killing a criminal and a hostage with one blow. Even from this distance, his instincts told him that this guy was not so simple. He thought, why did he leave that man alive? It was as if he entrusted him with dealing with him. Solin, Taimei's disciple, asked, why is he here? They should go down quickly. Taimei said that he first had to finish one thing. Taimei suddenly jumped off the roof, followed by his disciple, and then with one kick he knocked out the man from the Dark Amulets. Solin asked who was it. Taimei said that it was a minion of the Dark Amulets. Solin noted that he was still alive. Should she deliver the finishing blow? Taimei said that he would be judged according to local laws. Solin asked why such complications? After all, those born to do evil deeds can only be corrected by the grave. She believed that their duty was to deal with him here and now. Taimei said that this was a request from the one who dealt with his friends. Solin asked in surprise how he could ask such a thing from such a distance. She wondered if anyone could really notice the presence of a teacher from such a distance. Even the best students of their school tried their best, but they could not even make out his shadow. If she had not known that their teacher often liked to climb onto the roof, she would not have found him. Taimei noted that the guy had a very keen eye. Solin asked if she was the same age as him. Taimei said that she could be. Then he said that it was his sword. Solin noted that it was broken. She wondered, did he not strengthen the blade with Naigong? In other words, did he not use abilities at all? Solin said, did he defeat the opponents without using abilities? Is he better than her in body cultivation and blade control? The protagonist arrived at the Central Continent, an independent region that exists to maintain peace between the continents. People from all the continents flock to this place and bring famous goods. In Sur, the port of the Central Continent, you can find body cultivation pills that came from the fourth continent, or taste the meat of the water hound from the first continent, and various offers including a first-class fortune teller from the second continent. The protagonist thought that there were so many people here. Where was the train station? A passerby offered him, introducing herself as a teacher of the famous fortune teller Miko, that she could predict his fate for half the price. Sia Burbistoran, a fortune teller of Miko from the Silver Fox clan, said that she would really like to meet her. Maybe she could tell her fortune? She can predict anyone's fate except her own. The passerby asked if she was worried about her future. Sia said that she was. The protagonist wondered if she was really from the Silver Fox clan. Sia asked if the sight of her ears and tail was really that unusual for him. He did not need to apologize for that. She simply decided that he was interested in her. That's all. Maybe fate itself brought them together. They should tell their futures together. She will pay. MC said that he refuses this. Sia noted that she did not mean anything like that. She's just new to the Central Continent, and she feels sad about going to the fortune teller alone. Besides, he is also worried about his destiny, just like she is. The protagonist said that he is not interested. Sia said that she does not need it either. A passerby shouted that she is fed up with everything. She's having no luck in business today. Nariel, a bodyguard from the second continent, asked Sia if she should deal with her. Sia said that she can leave her alone. After all, she was the one who treated her badly. Nariel noted that the woman used her reputation to lure a client. Sia said that it does not matter. She does not have the patience to deal with everyone who does that. She is more interested in the guy she was talking to. Nariel shouted, did she really fall in love with him at first sight? Sia said that she misunderstood her. She was interested in him because she couldn't see anything about his fate. She thought that this was a guy with a fate as blank as a sheet of paper. She had never seen anything like this in her entire life, so she couldn't help but talk to him. She was sure that their paths would cross again in the future. Nariel noted that she couldn't see his fate. Sia said that was true, but she did see his ticket, and oddly enough, they were heading to the same place. She found it strange, but he reminded her of a man from the past, whom she accidentally met 10 years ago. She remembered that he had a strange fate. She wondered where he was now, and what he was doing. Nariel asked if she was referring to the man who stole the relic of the first Beast King. Sia noted that she recognized him as a bad person. However, his words about forging your own destiny. If you don't see a way forward, you can only act at your own discretion. For some reason, she remembered them. So instead of looking at this guy's destiny, she decided to look somewhere else, and her subconscious gaze stopped on the ticket. For some reason, she was convinced that they would meet again. At this time, the protagonist thought that the girl his age was from the Silver Fox clan, and her words about seeing someone else's destiny. Was this really what grandfather was talking about? There are 3 stars that influence how his constellation of destiny will turn out. Among them is Sia from the Silver Fox clan, who belongs to his generation. Her destiny is to pierce his heart with a spear. However, this is strange. If he is destined to become an enemy with her, then why did she act so friendly? Is it because his fate has become more neutral? If so, then the fate of others could have changed too. According to Grandpa, there are more than 20 people in the world who are destined to kill him. And that's just the most conservative estimate. If you count everyone, there are more than 100. He wants to avoid this fate, each of them. This is the main goal of his journey. After some time, in the capital of Barakal, in the Iron Heart Forge, the protagonist said that he was looking for one person who works here. Amy, a forge worker, asked, "What is his name?" The protagonist said the name is Kale. Amy thought, "Is this really a problem client who will demand a weapon?" She said that an appointment is required to meet the blacksmith. MC noted that he did not make an appointment in advance, but he has this for him. Can she give it to him? When he receives it, he will immediately understand everything. The protagonist thought that he himself does not know what is in this box. Grandpa forbade asking about it. The protagonist said that if he looked at it and still didn't want to see him, he would just leave. Amy wondered if she was wrong about him. She said that Kale was on break right now, but he could wait here. MC thought that, as expected, the sacred circle was shining blindingly white. Dean Cospel, the assistant director of the Iron Heart Forge, said that she was being too polite as usual. Customers like that should be thrown out of here immediately. The protagonist thought that the artifact had turned black because of it. However, that was strange. What kind of villain with such a black aura would work in the forge? Dean shouted that if he wanted to meet Kale, he better bring money. Then he would become a VIP customer, and he would let him meet him. Someone like him doesn't have much money, right? The protagonist noted that even if he had money, he still wouldn't buy something that this worker had a hand in. Dean shouted, "Where did he get such impudence from?" MC said that it was not impudence, but a fact. He saw no point in buying a blade that could not withstand his strength. Dean asked, in his opinion, he was not capable of creating a good blade. The protagonist said that he had already broken many blades. Dean said that he wanted to test it. He was taking responsibility. The protagonist noted that he did not look like someone who could handle responsibility. He believed that he was only able to use the good name of this forge. If you look closely, there were several low-grade blades lying around. This was definitely his work. Although you would not be able to tell by him, but he believed that he knew his place better than he seemed. MC said, taking one of the blades, that it looked like a beautiful blade, in fact, mediocre, just like him. Dean shouted, "Why did he allow himself to do this?" The protagonist said that he brought trouble on himself. The protagonist thought that this worker was already prepared to deceive travelers who knew nothing about weapons. MC said that one swing was enough for this blade to break. How would he be held responsible for this? Dean thought that this couldn't be true. Even if it was a copy, the sword shouldn't break from one swing. Kale Dipple, the director of the Iron Heart Forge, said that he hadn't personally shown up at the shop for a long time, but something interesting was brewing here. Who was responsible for this commotion? Dean shouted that this customer should explain everything. He was the one who started smashing their swords for no reason. He would call the guards right now. Kale shouted that he should shut up. Why was such trash in their sanctuary? His reaction says a lot. Now he understands where the rumors come from that their blades are flawed. He will never forgive for this. He would make him pay in full for having the nerve to tarnish the name of their forge. Dean shouted as he was being led away by the other workers that this guy had damaged one of their blades. He said that their blades could not withstand his strength. So no matter how much money he had, he would not buy anything from them. The protagonist thought that he was acting like a cliched villain. Kale shouted that he would talk to him later, but for now, he should shut up. The forge director asked the protagonist if his words were true. MC confirmed that it was all true. Kale stated that he expected a lot from someone who brought him such a gift from an old friend. However, he could take this and leave, and they could assume that he did not see anything. The protagonist thought, how could a stick be inside a box? Kale said that he should also take this as a reward. Among the blades displayed on the wall, this is one of the best. Let him take this and leave here. Is he unhappy with the gift? Or is he embarrassed that he didn't pay anything for this blade? Maybe he wants to pay in gold coins? The protagonist said, while unsheathing the blade, that his words had been thoughtless before. Now he understands that his words could have been perceived as an insult. But this is just a misunderstanding. He did not mean to express contempt for the blades that were sold here. He only wanted to say that it was not their blades that were the problem, but simply that no sword could withstand his power. After a while, the protagonist thought that he had already made the 8th swing of this blade. Kale screamed. He did not even direct mana into the blade, and the sword broke? Could he really overload the sword with his power? After a while, Kale apologized to the protagonist. The forge director said that his grandson Reinhardt had come to him, and he had behaved so terribly. The protagonist noted that it was okay. He had been rude too, so he was asking him for forgiveness. MC thought that he lacked sensitivity. He had difficulty understanding the feelings of people around him, so he should pay more attention. Kale asked why he came here. He brought a branch of mistletoe with him. It must be important. The protagonist asked if it was really a branch of mistletoe. Kale asked why he didn't know what he brought himself. The protagonist said that his grandfather told him never to open the box. By the way, are the branches of this tree really that valuable? Kale said that it wasn't about the price, it was considered a sacred item. MC thought that his grandfather must have stolen it too. The protagonist noted that the item didn't feel like it had enough aura to be considered sacred. Kale said that it hadn't been processed yet, but the branch of mistletoe was an excellent material. If a blade were made from it, this sword would be unrivaled. 20 years ago, Reinhardt talked about nothing but this, although he refused to make a blade out of it. The protagonist asked, can he make a sword out of it now? He saw for himself that for some reason he couldn't wield a blade made of metal. No matter how famous the sword was, it would break in his hands before he could make 10 swings. The protagonist thought that after he absorbed the treasure from the seabed 10 years ago, he had lost the ability to wield metal. Iron, orichalcum, mithril, all of them would break as soon as he held them in his hands. Nowadays, it was almost impossible to find a blade that wasn't made of metal. In other words, he couldn't wield his own sword. Kale noted that it had the ability to deform metal, just like the beast from the seabed, according to legend. Now he understood why Reinhardt sent him to him with a branch of mistletoe. Its ability would have no effect on a weapon made of this tree. The protagonist shouted, so he will have his own sword? Then he asks this blacksmith to make a blade for him. Kale said that it would not be a problem for him to create such a weapon. The protagonist thought that he had already given up hope that he would ever find his sword. Apparently, this was the last gift from his grandfather. After a while, the forge workers stood at the entrance in confusion. They did not dare to confess everything to the forge director. Amy said that she would tell everything herself, and they should get back to work. The protagonist asked, what was the matter? The workers looked so serious. Amy shouted, this is an unrivaled warrior? The protagonist clarified, did he understand correctly that Dean ran away? Amy shouted that she was asking for forgiveness for this. It was their fault that the forge worker who insulted him ran away. However, they will definitely catch him and make him suffer for trying to deceive them. They are very sorry for this. MC thought that they really had let him go. However, why such a pretentious apology? Suddenly, he realized that they had taken him for an unrivaled master who had walked around 4 continents. Such people are known for their difficult character, and if they don't like something, they can kill on the spot. However, he is not a master at all. What would his grandfather do in his place? The protagonist said that he does not hold a grudge against them. Amy said that she was grateful for their understanding, and then she asked where he went. After some time, the protagonist was suddenly attacked by mercenaries who were promised gold. The protagonist thought that the artifact showed that they were all villains. MC quickly made a series of swings with his weapon, crushing his enemies. The protagonist thought that this weapon was also good for nothing. Then he took the enemy's weapon and threw it at the mercenary. The protagonist pinned the mercenary boss to the ground and said that it was a good blade. The mercenaries rushed to save their boss, but the protagonist destroyed them with one blow. The surviving mercenaries shouted that they were threatened. If they refused to join them, they would kill their families. The protagonist dealt a crushing blow and left only one mercenary, and he said that if he answered the questions, he would let him go. The mercenary shouted that he did not believe it. He would kill him anyway. The protagonist said that he swears an oath with his sword. MC thought that if a swordsman who made such an oath breaks it, the use of mana will be limited. For a swordmaster, breaking an oath is death. The protagonist said, raising his sword above his head, that he swears by the sword. If the person who appeared before him answers his questions truthfully, he will not harm him. That's enough, right? Who sent them to kill him? The protagonist stabbed the enemy in the leg and asked if he would continue to remain silent. The mercenary shouted that they were hired by a man named Ding. MC noted that this did not surprise him. How exactly did he hire them? The mercenary shouted that there was a large organization in Barakal that helps find temporary shelter. Ding used his connections in this organization and hired them. The protagonist said that this trash also got involved with a criminal gang. He thought that he was all glowing black in the forge, and he knew that there must be more to it than just a scam. MC asked where he could find this organization. The mercenary stated that this organization has a lot of secret hideouts. The protagonist noted that he only had to say where they met Ding. The mercenary said that it was at the Ron rest home. That's where he found them. The protagonist noted that it was not far from here. He didn't deceive him in anything, did he? Although it doesn't look like he was lying, MC stated that then he should die. The mercenary shouted that he made an oath on the sword. The protagonist said that it was a pity, but oaths on the sword did not work on him. Ever since he ate the peach from purgatory, there was no mana left in his body. Therefore, the restrictions related to the use of mana did not apply to him. The mercenary shouted that he made a promise. Where is his honor? The protagonist noted that a swordsman cannot forget about his honor. However, there is an exception to every rule, and for him, the promises he made to the villains can be broken, because that is how he was taught. The protagonist dealt a crushing blow to the mercenary, and then he said that he hoped that this sword would last longer. This sword could not withstand even 10 swings. He must get a weapon that will not break in his hands. Ron Rest House, no matter how you look at it, is an ordinary hotel from the outside. At first glance, it is an ordinary place, but underground passages are hidden. It is a meeting place for ruthless villains and thugs who do not hesitate to kidnap children. Later, in Ron's hotel room, Dean shouted that they could not kill even a single swordsman. If he was going to come himself, why did he rely on those idiots? He thought that this man was known to the entire criminal organization, Atla. If he sent him on a job, the boss would definitely appreciate him. The former forge worker asked, is he going right now? Atla's henchman asked, why should he do this? Dean shouted, isn't he here to deal with the guy who humiliated him? Atla's henchman said that his duties today are limited to being a courier. He is not here to take lives. He must get the information he has about the Ironheart Forge. He hasn't handed over everything yet, right? Dean thought, he's not going to kill him once he gives this information, is he? Atlas's minion said he didn't have to worry. He had no orders to kill him. He then said he had what he came for, so he was leaving. Dean yelled, if he left, who would guard him? Atlas' minion yelled that he should shut up. Can he hear it? It's quiet outside, right? At that moment, the kidnapped child asked if he could open his eyes. He had already read to 20. The protagonist removed the child's shackles and said he should be patient for a little while longer. He could fall asleep, and when he woke up, he would be in his mother's arms. Atlas' minion asked Dean, did he know him? Dean yelled that he was the one who humiliated him. Atlas' minion noted that he was ruthless for his age. Why did he kill everyone here? The protagonist asked, is he ruthless? It's not even funny. He feels like the same thing can be said about him. He dealt with those who boasted about the number of their victims, and made those who enjoyed torture suffer. And minor criminals can be shown a little mercy, right? But why should he? They don't even know what mercy is, so he will repay them with boundless evil. The protagonist asked, pointing a sword at the enemy, what sin does he have? Maybe it's enough to just destroy him? MC instantly closed the distance and dealt a crushing blow to Atla's henchman, who before dying thought that he had folded the blade so quickly that he didn't even notice it. The protagonist said that he shouldn't move. He hadn't finished him off yet. Or did he want to die in agony? Then he shouted to Dean that they were finally alone. Sometime later, in the Ironheart Forge, Kale asked, so his former assistant Dean works for Adel's criminal organization? The protagonist said that he found an info chip on him, a means of storing information invented on the third continent. In order to extract the data, an information output device that meets the requirements of this chip is needed. Kale noted that this info chip is a very old model. The protagonist said that they most likely did this for security purposes. This info chip model was made before mass production, so it will be difficult to find a tablet for this item. Kale asked how they could find out what information the criminal organization wanted to steal. MC noted that it would take time. Kale said that he had no idea what they could be planning against his forge. The protagonist said that first of all, they need to remain vigilant. They do not know what the Atlas will do or when it will happen. Kale said that he will be careful. However, until he sorts out his problems, he will not be able to make a sword for him. The protagonist noted that he did not hint at that. Kale asked, "Where did this child come from? He can't be his son, right?" MC said he rescued him from a criminal den. Can he trust him? No one will believe that he has no connection to the criminal organization at all. Kale said that he can leave him here. The protagonist was about to leave, but the forge director suddenly asked him to stop. Kale said that he found a secret compartment in the box he brought here with him, and there was a note for him. The protagonist thanked him, and Kale said that he didn't have to do that. He only passed on what was meant for him anyway. The protagonist said that he would send a message for him when he found a device to read the data chip. Sometime later, at the Raon rest home, Sia shouted, "How is this possible? Who was able to deal with Atl's accomplices so effectively?" Nariel noted that there were no people capable of such things on the central continent. Sia asked, "Did their ally do this?" Nariel said that she didn't know, but it was possible. Whether it was an ally or not, she felt sorry for the man who didn't know when to stop. Sia said that she was right, he had gone a bit overboard. Nariel said that he had dealt with the nasty people, and that wasn't a problem in itself, but he hadn't left anyone alive. Sia asked if he just didn't like small talk. She thought it reminded her of something. Nariel said that they should be glad anyway, that the criminal organization Atla had enemies other than them. Sia said that it would be great if it turned out that the other continents had sent their people. Nariel said that it was possible, since the criminal organization had already caused trouble on all the continents. So maybe there were others who wanted to destroy the organization Atla. Sia said that they should meet the man anyway. Nariel said that she would try to find out something about him. After some time at the hotel, the protagonist opened a note which said that if he was reading this letter, it meant that he had arrived on the central continent, found Kale there, and guessed to order a mistletoe blade from him. In addition, with a high probability, he had already encountered Sia. The protagonist thought, how did he know about this? It was just a coincidence. He continued reading, where it was written that he had fought the criminal organization Atla in Barakal. If everything is as he wrote, then he will die at the hands of this organization Atla. The next morning, the protagonist went to the mechanical district. This is a shopping district where they sell exclusively devices invented by the Technogenic Society from the third continent. The protagonist thought that he was not feeling well. If he had mana, he would not be so tired. Those with mana do not need much sleep, because mana stimulates the brain and the rest of the body, which helps to cope with fatigue, so they do not need much sleep. And drowsiness can be a problem for him. After a while, the protagonist asked if they had tablets for this info chip. The merchant noted that such models had been out of production for 27 years. Then the protagonist said that there was only one store left that he hadn't been to yet. He thought, maybe he could find it here? After a while, Sia and Nariel came into the same store. Sia said that they were looking for an old model device that would fit a certain info chip. The merchant asked in surprise if the old models had really come back into fashion. Just recently, a man came to him looking for the same thing, and this guy bought the last tablet of this model from him. Sia asked, does that mean he really doesn't have them anymore? Nariel whispered that it was unlikely that many people were looking for such an old model. Sia asked in a whisper, did she really think it was a person from the Atla organization? Nariel noted that this could not be ruled out. They should follow this buyer. Sia said that she really wanted to see the old version of the tablet. Maybe he would tell her who bought this tablet from him? After a while, the protagonist used the tablet to open the data from the info chip. A window with information about the Ironheart Forge appeared on the tablet screen. The protagonist thought, is this the personal data of the Ironheart employees? He must urgently inform Kale about this. Suddenly, Sia turned to him, who said that she finally found him. She thought that it would be him, if he still remembers, they met at the port. MC thought, why did this happen now? Sia asked, has he already forgotten? The protagonist said that he remembers her. And then he thought, there must be a bodyguard behind her. Sia said that she was glad about this, otherwise she would have to cry in front of the whole street. However, surprisingly, the further the stranger it gets. Why can't she see his fate? Nariel thought that now is not the time for this. They have an urgent matter. Sia asked, is he a servant of the Atla organization? Nariel thought, is it possible to ask such questions so directly? Well, who would answer such a thing honestly? The protagonist declared that this organization is his enemy. Shop Hasten, the leader of the Atla organization, asked, "Who do we have here?" He was wondering what kind of fish would bite his bait. Could it be the princess from the second continent? Sia shouted, "Why did the leader of the criminal organization Atla come here?" Shaw noted that they had not seen each other for a long time. It had been a year since they saw each other on the second continent, right? Suddenly, ordinary people ran away from them in horror, recognizing them as servants of the Atla organization. Shaw said that no one was eager to meet dear guests from the second continent. Nariel said that he should stay where he was. Shaw asked, weren't they interested in why they came to the central continent? If they did not want to answer, they could continue to remain silent. However, they bought this tablet to get to them, right? He suddenly turned his attention to the protagonist and asked, what else should he understand? If he saw correctly, then this tablet was not bought by the princess at all. The protagonist asked, did he use the tablet to track their location? Shaw stated that they deliberately planted it in the shop to lure out those who were acting against them. Nariel asked, did they build a tracking device into it? Shaw noted that thanks to this, they were able to catch them. Then he turned to the protagonist and asked how he got this tablet. MC noted that it was an accident. Shaw said that this seemed true, because he was not one of the Beastmen. Then, would he like to take a look at his experiment? A deafening sound was heard, which greatly affected the Beastmen. Shaw stated that this was the power of their invention, a means of suppressing the Beastmen. The guards of the Beast King are nothing against this. They will soon fall into a deep sleep. And when they wake up, they will find themselves in an underground prison. Nariel said that she was sorry that she couldn't do her duty. Sho said that it was his turn. Judging by the fact that he was still on his feet, he really was just a passerby. However, he couldn't let him go that easily. He had to go with them of his own free will, and if they didn't find anything, they would let him go. The protagonist asked if they were going to take him to their hideout. Shu said that they were, but they would only put shackles on him. He wasn't going to touch him. In the end, thanks to his help, they were able to capture the princess from the second continent. The protagonist thought that these were cold iron shackles, which are made of the strongest metal in this world. They have the ability to suppress mana. This item is worth more than an average-sized manor. The MC said that he agreed to go with them as a prisoner. After some time in the underground prison, Nariel thought that she was cold. Where is she now? Then she shouted, where is the princess now? Are these cold iron shackles? The protagonist asked, has she finally woken up? Sia was recently taken away from here. There is no one there, so she may not scream. The guards were called away somewhere, and they have not returned yet. Nariel noticed that he was also wearing shackles, so he was also an enemy of the Atlas organization? The protagonist said that he was simply looking for someone who could make a weapon for him. This sword would be the only one of its kind in the entire world, so he couldn't give up. He would go and destroy all the villains here. Nariel shouted, what's the matter? He has to stop. Does he even understand the situation they're in? They're wearing shackles made of cold iron that even the King of Beasts couldn't break free from. The protagonist declared, as he destroyed the shackles, that even cold iron is just metal. He can't be stopped with shackles like that. Nariel asked how he did it. The protagonist said, as he freed her, that she needed to sit still. It would take a little while. Nariel wondered if she was sleeping. Then she shouted that they were in an iron cage anyway. The protagonist asked, as he destroyed the cage, was that a problem? They need to go there. When they came to take Sia, the footsteps were moving away in this direction. After a while, Sho asked if Dean had finally done a good deed before his death. He had finally managed to capture the fortune teller Miko. The princess from the second continent should be happy that thanks to her, he will get a promotion. However, what beautiful eyes she has, he wants to admire them for the rest of his life. Just the thought of it makes him delighted. Sia asked if she could get rid of his eyes. She should try if he liked it so much. Sho said that she was a very brave princess. However, he could not resist, even if the boss got angry. Sia shouted that she would repay him for his evil deed twice as much. Sho noted that she needed to be obedient and not move. Suddenly there was a noise, and he shouted, who dared to come here? The protagonist sent the villain flying with one kick. The protagonist asked, turning to the princess, is she okay? Now he will free her. Sia said that she was very grateful to him for his help. However, she was shackled in cold iron shackles. MC destroyed the shackles with his hands while the princess stared at her hands in surprise. The protagonist noted that Nariel was waiting for her outside. She should go to her, but in the meantime he wanted to ask him something. What followed would not be a sight for her eyes. Then Shia left the room and Nariel shouted that she was glad that she was okay. Suddenly, terrible screams were heard from behind the door. Nariel asked why such sounds were coming from there. Sia noted that he wanted to ask him something. Nariel said that this guy destroyed the cold iron shackles. She thought, where did such a guy come from? And what is he trying to achieve? After a while, the protagonist said that he apologized to them for having to wait for him. Now they can leave here. It is not safe to stay here. Sia asked how the man was. The protagonist stated that he had died, and he strongly advised against looking at his body. Nariel noted that she should see for herself. The MC said that she would regret her decision. Nariel asked how this could have happened. After some time, the protagonist noted that Atla's organization had specially set up a lair here to make it harder to find them. If they were being pursued, they should have fallen behind by now. They could stop here and talk. He wanted to discuss something with them. First, this was data on the device that was used to neutralize them. Apparently, the device negatively affected the circulation of their energy inside their body and caused an overload of the entire organism. He would like to say that he understood how it worked, but Atla's minions themselves did not know how the device worked. Nariel said that they risked losing their advantage, so for now it was better for them not to use the circulation at all. Sia stated that she thanked him for the information he had obtained for them. The protagonist noted that he had his own reasons for doing this, so they didn't have to thank him. It's important to note that he had figured out what the criminal organization Atla was trying to achieve. Their goal was to destroy the central continent. With the destruction of the central continent, the cooperation agreement between the 4 continents would be null and void. They then planned to mobilize all the forces they had on each continent and start an intercontinental war. And while the continents were running low, the Atla organization would find a way to take control of the world. MC thought, remembering his grandfather's words, that he finally understood why he could die because of the Atla organization. He then said that that was it. From now on, he would act alone. Sia said that they didn't even have time to thank him properly. He should go with them. The protagonist stated that he had urgent business. He thought that he didn't know when the Atla organization was planning to take over the forge. He should hurry. Sia asked, would they ever be able to see each other again? The protagonist noted that he would be waiting for their next meeting. Maybe they could meet tomorrow at 6 p.m.? But where should they meet? Sia said that there was a tavern called Sara on the central shopping street. She would wait for him there. MC said that they would see each other there then. Nariel noted that his powers were amazing. She thought that he could match the strength of the King of Beasts. Sia asked, turning to Nariel, was this fate? The only person in the world whose future was hidden from her had just saved her life. Tomorrow she would definitely find out his name. Sometime later, at the Ironheart Forge, the protagonist asked if anyone was there. Kale asked why he had come at such a late hour. The protagonist stated that he was able to find out what information was contained on the data chip that Dean had. Sometime later, Kale said that he now understood what the Atla organization was planning. MC noted that they wanted to start a war to secure a supply of weapons. They decided to target his forge. Kale said that he had not ruled out such an option. The protagonist said that the first thing they needed to do was hide with their families. Kale said that this was not a way out of this situation. If they found out that their plan had been discovered, they would immediately attack. Besides, after he had destroyed their hideout, they would definitely be looking for him. And if the Atla organization decided that they were the ones who sent him to them, they would be finished. The protagonist said that he apologized to him. He had acted thoughtlessly. Kale said that he should not blame himself too much. His thoughts were simply carried away by the new weapon. He did not need to worry about that either. He would definitely make this sword for him. However, he lacked a rare ore. Celitoliton is a special metal from the second continent. It is necessary to balance the property of mistletoe. If only he had it, he would have made a weapon for him in a week. The protagonist stated that he could get it. With the help of the princess from the second continent, he would try to get the celitoliton. The next day at the tavern, Sia asked why he suddenly started talking about celitoliton. The protagonist asked, could she get it as soon as possible? Sia said that there would be no problem getting it. However, it could take a long time. Then she asked, noticing Nariel's weapon, did it matter whether it was processed or not? MC noted that it would be fine in any form. Sia said that then she could get it for him right now. Nariel asked, was she going to do what she thought? They couldn't do that. Sia addressed Nariel sternly, and then insistently asked her to hand over her weapon. Nariel said that she was asking not to do that. She received this blade from the King of Beasts himself. This weapon is as dear to her as her own life. Sia pressured her bodyguard, and she agreed to give up her weapon. The protagonist said that he thanks her for this. If they need information about other Atlas organization hideouts, he can share. He can tell them anything they want to know. Sia noted that this is a very generous offer. even a little suspicious. What does he want? The protagonist said that he does not want anything special, just to join forces. Sia asked, does he want to make an alliance with them? The protagonist noted that they should have guessed that he was working alone. Sia thought, how could they know about this? MC said that in order to confront the Atlas organization, he must acquire reliable allies. Sia asked, does he really consider them reliable allies? The protagonist said, looking at the white glow, that he immediately sees who he can trust. Of course, if they don't trust him, there's nothing to be done. Sia shouted that they trust him. The protagonist asked, so they're ready to form an alliance with him? Sia said that they're not against it at all. The MC said that he doesn't know how long they're destined to work together, but he hopes for their cooperation. They said that it's mutual. The protagonist said, taking the weapon from the table, that he'll be gone for a while. He has to give this weapon to someone. Sia said, introducing herself, that the inn they were staying at was marked here. He could come there right away. The protagonist thought, he hadn't introduced himself yet. Was it necessary to give her his full name? And then he just told her his name. She would wait for their next meeting. After a while, he thought that he had already given the weapon to Kale to make a new weapon, so he had finished the urgent matter. In a week, the sword would be ready, his own weapon, with which he could do whatever he wanted. According to Kale, this sword would be sacred, so this weapon would not compare to those he had used before. After a while, at the inn for Beastman, the protagonist thought, is he already there? If he is not mistaken, then this is the inn. The protagonist said that it was him. Unfortunately, the rum ran out. Nariel said that he quickly dealt with his urgent matter. They did not expect him to return so quickly. MC noted that the matter was indeed urgent, but it did not take much time, although now something else is important. How did Shaw get hold of the device for controlling the circulation? He could not get it out of his head. The protagonist stated, upon seeing the villain with a black aura, that he did not expect to find the answer to this question here. Jafril, a spy for the Atla organization, shouted why he was approaching him with a sword in his hands. The protagonist said that he did not have to pretend to be an idiot. MC stated, having made the finishing blow, that he himself knew this very well. The Beastman looked at Jeffril's body in horror. The protagonist noted, introducing himself, that he was apologizing to them. He did not introduce himself from the doorway. He was interrupted. He is glad to meet them. They will work together for some time. He hopes for their cooperation. The Beastmen grabbed their weapons and pounced on the protagonist. The protagonist parried the blows of his opponents, trying not to kill them. MC said that they misunderstood him. The protagonist scattered all the Beastmen with one swing of his weapon. The protagonist thought that Nariel had no intention of stopping them. If Sia were here, there would have been much less misunderstanding. MC parried another blow from his opponent, and he stated as his weapon fell apart that this guy was a spy. The Beastman shouted, frozen in place, that he couldn't be a spy. Nariel shouted at them to shut up. Does he have proof of his words? The protagonist asked if she knew what school he belonged to. His school studied magic that affected the caster's body, namely, transformation magic. The Beastman stared in shock at Fro's body, which had become human. The protagonist noted that by implanting a special magic stone, one can copy not only the physique and appearance, but also the mana characteristics of another race by 100%. Therefore, he was a spy sent by the Atla organization. Nariel said that she now understands why he decided to attack right away. However, several questions arise. First, how was the warrior able to see the magic of the transformation school? Second, why didn't he immediately tell them about the spy, but decided to eliminate him himself? The protagonist said that he knows absolutely all 73 schools of magic that exist on the first continent. He can explain the features of each one if they don't believe him. And he can't answer the second question so easily, because it was inevitable due to his obsessive-compulsive disorder. The protagonist remembered his grandfather's words, who said that he possessed an incredible amount of malice. Therefore, he distorted his fate so that his malice would only manifest under certain conditions. When it comes to eradicating evil, he can have no fear and follow his instinct. MC opened his eyes and said that when he comes face to face with evil, his body moves on its own, and he cannot control it. Sometime later, on the second floor of the Beastman Inn, Nariel noted that next time he should try to warn them of his intentions in advance. The protagonist said that he apologized for this. He would try to restrain himself. Nariel said that she was grateful to him. He could not worry. She would convey everything to the princess herself, and she would reward him appropriately. The protagonist asked where Sia was now. Nariel said that right now the princess was upstairs praying. On full moon days, she prays to the god of fate. MC noted that he was glad to hear this, because he thought that she went outside. Nariel shouted that she would never let the princess go unaccompanied. First of all, there was a high probability that something dangerous would happen at the altar. Although wait, Now that she thought about it, Slayer and Jeffril prepared the altar. After a while, Neriel burst into the room where the princess was. Sia said that she had come after all. Neriel said that she was glad that she was okay. Sia asked if she was here. Did that mean that the lower floor was under attack? In any case, she did the right thing by coming here. After all, there were few who could defeat her on this day. And in a critical situation, the best decision was to come here. Neriel thought that no one could kill the princess on a full moon. Then she asked, where is the assailant who attacked her? Sia said that he is no longer here. He appeared here so suddenly that she had to put in a little more effort to fight off this enemy. And she is upset about this. If she could save this enemy's life, then she could interrogate him and get valuable information. Neriel asked what's wrong? Sia noted that they are lucky. There is another enemy here. Although he hid his presence well, however, as long as the moonlight illuminates the ground, she will be able to find him, no matter how he hides. Neriel shouted that she must stop. She thought that the only one who could hide his presence so skillfully was Cain. The princess's strength on a full moon was comparable to the king of beasts in his youth. Even he wouldn't be able to handle her if she suddenly attacked him. I hope she doesn't kill him. At that moment, Sia said, kicking the protagonist, that he was stronger than she expected. And then she asked, why him? She was apologizing to him. She mistook him for an enemy. She was very ashamed of it. The protagonist said that everything was fine. She could raise her head. Neriel thought she couldn't believe it. He was able to easily stop a blow from the princess, who was equal in strength to the king of beasts himself right now. So he was stronger than the king of beasts himself? Sometime later, in a hotel room, Sia said that Jeffril turned out to be a spy, and because of the school's magic, she was unable to see his fate. The protagonist asked, does the magic of the Jeffril school have anything to do with the ability to see the future? Sia said that he should know she is able to see the fate of others. She must see the creature in front of her. No other conditions are required. The protagonist asked, does this mean that her ability always works? Sia noted that you could say that. Even during a fight, she can observe the enemy's mana to see their fate. MC thought that, simply put, the fate of a creature can be determined by their innate mana. Even if the enemy hides their mana, she can see their fate. If the enemy has mana, she will be able to predict their fate. This ability can clearly be called cheating. Now he understands why she came to the central continent with a whole squad of beastmen. Neriel said that this is a state secret, and she reveals it so easily. Sia asked, is a state secret more important than her own life? Neriel said that she asks him not to tell others about it. The protagonist turned his gaze towards the window. Sia asked, what's the matter? The protagonist noted that, judging by their reaction, they also noticed that they were surrounded. At this time, at a distance of 1.5 kilometers from the Beastman Inn. Ratman, Alt's henchman, asked why he had not returned with a report yet. When they finished the job, maybe they could all dump him? Rashudo, the 12th rank commander of the Alt organization, a swordsman of the cursed sword that inflicts holy wounds, said that transformation magic is very risky, so he himself will most likely just die on this mission. Ratman noted that now he understands why they sent him there as a spy. Adel's henchman said that he should shut up. Ratman said that he should change his commanding tone. Jay said that the spy left for the point 30 minutes ago, and they still have not received any signal from him. Hasn't he realized what this means yet? Ratman said they easily dealt with everyone and has already escaped. Jay asked why he had to work with such an idiot. Ratman shouted, why is he so impudent? Jay asked, turning to Rashudo, can he get rid of another ballast? Ratman asked, turning to Rashudo, even if it is wrong, but he can chop off his head? Rashudo said that they can do whatever they want. However, whoever draws his sword first, he will personally chop off his head. Did they understand him correctly? His subordinates thought that he had such an overwhelming bloodlust. Now they felt the power of a rank 12 in the Atlas organization. Rashudo ordered Jay to tell the others that if they do not receive any signal from the spy within a minute, they will begin the invasion. Ratman noted that they can finally take action soon. Suddenly, he noticed that their commander was killed. Ratman shouted to Jay that they were under attack. He must immediately inform the others while he holds off the enemy. However, he saw Jay's body, which was already crushed. Ratman asked how this happened. The protagonist asked if he did not notice his bloodlust, or did he overestimate him. Ratman shouted, was he the one who killed everyone here? He should answer when a human talks to him. The protagonist asked, does he seriously consider himself a human? MC stated, delivering a crushing blow to Ratman, that he is ordinary cannon fodder. The protagonist looked at his reflection in the weapon and said that it was a great sword. It would last for 3 whole days. At this time, in the inn, Neriel said that the enemy now knew their location. Therefore, they would leave this base and look for a new shelter. Addressing the Beastman, she slapped her hand on the map and told them to get rid of everything that could lead to a leak of information and take only the necessary things with them. The others agreed with her, and a few moments later, Kane entered the room and said that he had returned. Nariel thanked him for his help and asked how many enemies surrounded them. It would be useful to know their number and who their commander was. He asked if it was so important. She said that it was necessary to know your enemy by sight in order to have an advantage over him. He awkwardly scratched the back of his head and said that all the attackers were dead. She screamed in surprise. He dealt with an entire squad in 3 minutes? Then she looked at the sword on his belt, and he said that he brought it as a trophy. She said in surprise that he defeated the swordsman of the cursed sword in 3 minutes? He asked, so he is the owner of this sword? He just killed him and did not know his name. She said that he killed a swordsman named Rashudo. He is one of the best in Atla. And this is not just a cursed sword, they say it is capable of inflicting holy wounds. The protagonist looked at the weapon and said that he thought that the density of mana that the sword is endowed with was simply too high, and this is a cursed sword? He did not know about it? Everyone has heard of this legendary sword at least once in their life. He said that he was not particularly interested in it. She thoughtfully said that he did not even know about the Black Wolf sword. At that moment, Sia came to them and, apologizing for the wait, said that the restoration was complete. The protagonist thought that she must have been gathering her strength to return to normal. She passed him by and said that she was grateful for everything he had done for them, and that she would handle the rest herself. He wondered if she hadn't heard his conversation with Nariel. He wanted to explain, but she interrupted him and said that she would deal with each of them herself. He said that there was no need for that. She said that she promised that they would not inconvenience him anymore. He still finished speaking, saying that he had already dealt with all of the attackers. She smiled awkwardly and asked, what? At this time, in a small hideout in Circassia, the capital of the second continent, a subordinate, addressing an 8th-rank Thunder Emperor named Wang, said that they had lost contact with the swordsman of the cursed sword. They assumed that he had fallen. He asked in surprise, fallen? There was no way he would lose to the offspring of the Beast King. His strength was equal to the 7th rank. She said that she thought so too, but she assumed that something unusual had happened. She heard that the princess was born with more Beastoran blood than her predecessor. There was a good chance that the princess had awakened her powers shortly before the clash, thus surpassing Lord Rasudo in battle. Van took a sip of his drink and said that not only did the Beastman have survival instincts and fighting skills, but she had also awakened the Beastoran blood. It was good that her powers had awakened, but if her hypothesis was correct, they would have a lot of trouble. She said that she would have intelligence check the information, and if the fears were confirmed, they would have to reconsider their strategy for subduing the Beast King. He said that he was relying on her, and then asked what they should do. She asked what he meant. Van replied, about capturing the princess. They needed to come up with a plan. She said that she had a backup plan in case it failed. He said that was fine, in which case he would leave it to her and continue where he left off. The princess would not escape this time. The next day in the forest on the outskirts of Barakal City, the protagonist approached a dilapidated building in the forest and remembered Sia's words about meeting at the specified place. He thought that it was only 9 o'clock. He had come 2 hours early. Then he left his things near a tree and thought that he could spend the remaining time on internal contemplation. Taking a comfortable position, he began to concentrate. Initially, the body follows the mind, and the mind follows the body. He remembered the words of his grandfather, who asked him what he thought came first, the body or the mind. If he could not answer this question now, he should reason about it until he found the answer. This was his first task. He wondered if he had learned the answer today. At this time, Nariel accompanied the princess in the forest and said that she felt like she was exhausted. Sia said that using the circulation twice a day was too hard. And didn't she feel like they were walking in circles? She said that it was not her first time in this area, so there was no way they could get lost. Then Sia felt an unusual energy in the air. The bodyguard said that there might be a shrine nearby. Then, they followed the trail and came to the protagonist, who was surrounded by forest animals, like a princess in a cartoon. Sia thought that it reminded her of that famous painting that her brother once showed her, the beautiful paradise land. Suddenly, she saw a dark aura on the protagonist's chest and thought, a demon. At this moment, the protagonist was in his consciousness. He thought that after eating the paradise peach, he could no longer use mana. But during internal contemplation, mana returned to him for a short time. He asked, is it part or all of the mana that returned? Looking ahead, he thought that maybe today would be the answer to this question. Then, he saw 2 silhouettes and asked, how long have they been here? The girls jumped in surprise and Nariel answered, about 5 minutes. He thought, why didn't he notice them? Because his body and mind didn't care about them. Was the problem really in his body? He then greeted them and Sia looked at him in surprise. Then she apologized and said that she thought she saw something strange. He asked in surprise, strange? 20 minutes later, the Beastman arrived at the designated place. They apologized for being late, but Nariel said that it wasn't their fault, but Mr. Kane's. He asked, was it his fault? She said that his mana had turned this forest into a labyrinth. Didn't he do it on purpose? Mana is also contained in nature itself. The protagonist thought, speaking of mana in nature, the sacred fruit that concentrates the spirit of paradise within itself, the paradise peach. The energy emanating from this fruit is as natural as the mana of nature. Simply put, during internal contemplation, the energy of the paradise peach comes out. And this is useful information. He's getting closer to solving the problem. Then Nariel suggested that they start the meeting, but the princess's thoughts were occupied by the dark aura on the protagonist's chest. She thought, is this his destiny? But it can't be. She believes him. At that moment, her bodyguard said that the meeting was over. They needed to move. The animals split into teams. Some of them were monitoring the radio broadcast. Others were supplying supplies. Others were scouting and magic signaling. The protagonist told Nariel that she was talented, and she said that they intended to return to the other end of the continent to regroup. Considering what he had done for them, it was a shame to ask for more. He told her not to worry. He would need their help someday. She said that they would leave on the royal airship in 4 days. So if he needed anything. He looked at her ear and thought, is this a sound channel? She scratched her ear and asked, what? And then said that Atla had made her move. He asked, are they heading here? She said that it was not so, and they were rioting in the central district of the capital. At that moment, the bandits had already arrived at the Steel Heart, capturing Amy. They were presenting her face to the fire, and Kale was shouting for them to stop. The guy handed him a piece of paper and said that they would let her go if Steel Heart signed a contract. Near the entrance to Steel Heart, there were warriors, and turning to the customers who came up, they said that they were not working today. The guy asked why. The warrior smiled and said that there were some problems and they needed some time to sort it out. He sighed regretfully, and then the warrior said that they were very sorry. The customers thanked them and then turned around and started chatting. Was it true that the Self-Defense Committee on the Central Continent was very polite? His girlfriend agreed with him and added that they were well-mannered. Then the warrior sighed and said that he was going to die of boredom. His colleague said that because of their reputation, they couldn't even take a step to the side. He looked at him sharply and told him to speak more quietly. If the management found out that they had ruined the reputation they had built up over so many years, they would be thrown out in an instant. At that moment, the protagonist appeared next to them and said, "Here come the guard dogs." They began to look around in fear, looking for the source of the voice. The very next moment, he wrung their necks. Then, turning to Sia, he thanked her for sharing the information. Thanks to her, everything went smoothly. She smiled and said that she was glad she could help. 2 more warriors ran at the protagonist with their swords drawn, but he knocked out the enemy with a lightning strike to the neck. The remaining warrior turned around and ran in the opposite direction, thinking that he was a monster and he could not win. He then shouted to the lady in the purple dress, she must immediately inform the committee. The protagonist said that he should not try. No one would see or hear him from outside anyway. He then grabbed his head, and his lifeless body fell to the ground. After which he said that he had dealt with the spies. He then asked if he could move on to attaching the talisman. Sia confirmed this and said that he should keep a sufficient distance. He took out several seals and said that he understood. The intervals were from 92 to 734 centimeters. She shouted in surprise, only 2 seconds had passed. He said he had a good eye. She thought that his ability could not be explained by just a good eye. Even the moon rabbits from the second continent, famous for the sharpness of their senses, could not. But now was not the time to think about it. A dome formed over the Steel Heart, and she said that the temporary magic circles had become permanent. They were now cut off from the outside world. Kane asked how long this would last. She said 10 minutes. He thought that on the full moon, she would gain absolute power, enough to defeat enemies alone, and on other days, use the circles to provide support from the rear. With her, he could turn around. Then he said that he could do it in that time. At this moment, inside the Steel Heart, a member of Atlas continued to bring Emi to the fire and said that if he did not sign, he would send his people straight into the forge, one by one. He has 5 seconds. Then he started counting down. Kale shouted at the last second, "Okay, he will sign everything, but he must let the worker go." The bandit said it was a wise decision, but there was a problem. He told him to sign everything before he counted to 0. Well, she must scream for them properly. With that, The bandit threw Amy into the fire. Then their commander turned around and asked, "Has he got it through his head?" "You can't go against Atlas." At that moment, his subordinates screamed for help. The protagonist appeared behind him and said that being burned alive is the most painful way to die. With every breath, the fire melts the lungs. The body's cells try to resist, and the nerves constantly send signals to the brain. Therefore, it is very difficult to lose consciousness. Before death, a person feels how cell after cell is burned. Sounds fun? He will let him enjoy it to the fullest. This is his punishment. Then he kicked the bandit in the chest, sending him straight into the fire. He told him to purify himself in the flames. Then he looked at his subordinates and asked who wanted to be next. After a while, everyone went outside. Kale put his hand on Amy's shoulder and asked for forgiveness. Sitting on the ground, she said that everything was fine and it was not his fault. Then he said that he would get water. But the protagonist stopped him and said that her epithelium had already suffered. If it was cooled now, it would only get worse. We need to wait until she was cured with healing magic. Sia was on the roof at that moment and wondered if the killing intent was coming from Cain. He used a sound channel, but she did not know. She and her bodyguard landed on the ground. She asked what happened. He asked if she could use healing magic on this girl. She sent healing energy to the victim and asked if this was the work of those idiots. She will fix everything now. The protagonist thought that this was a bit different from the healing magic he had encountered in the temples. A special technique from the second continent? A few moments later, the princess told Amy that she could move. She grabbed her face and said that nothing hurt. Kale said that he had met many healers in his time, but this was the first time he had seen a technique of this level. However, what else could one expect from Kane's friends? Sia waved her hands and said that he was exaggerating, that she was not fit to hold a candle to him. The protagonist thought that her potential for supporting him in battle exceeded all his expectations. Until he tried to fight with her, he would not know, but it seemed that she could perfectly compensate for all his weaknesses. Then Nariel, turning to the guys, said that there were still 3 left and they needed to leave quickly. Kale said that he would figure it out completely, and then, turning to the workers, said that they needed to leave right now. One of the workers ran up to him and said that if they just left here, what would happen to the weapons? He said that they would have to make new ones. Right now, they had to think about surviving. They had to go faster. Then, Kane stopped him and said that he had one request. After a while, Sia extended the circles for 5 minutes, and the protagonist thanked her, saying that it was enough for him. He thought that she was really strong. Kale scratched his head and said that he was in a hurry. They needed to take the weapons with them. They could leave it in the warehouse near his house. The protagonist said that it would be better to go to the main warehouse first and take all the weapons there with them. The owner of the Steel Heart asked in surprise, "How will they carry more than 1,000 blades?" At that moment, MC took out Mimic from his pocket, and Sia asked in surprise, "What is it?" He said that it was better for her not to touch it. The next moment the chest opened, revealing sharp teeth. He then apologized and said that he should have warned her. Kale asked if this was a mysterious shrine born from the sin of greed. Mimic, a top-class artifact, a living treasure chest. He asked where he got the legacy of a demon that disappeared into the records of history. After a while, several bandits broke down the door and entered the warehouse, and seeing the empty walls, one of them shouted, "What is this? There are no weapons here." He then turned around and ordered his subordinates to seize the forge workers and their families. He clenched his fist in anger and thought, "Are they going against Atla? He will kill everyone they care about before their eyes, slowly and painfully." At this moment the boys had already met in the forest. One of the workers called out to Kale and asked if he was safe. Then he patted him on the shoulder and said that they knew everything. Those bastards wanted to kidnap not only them, but their families as well. The owner of the forge said that he was very ashamed, but the employees said that their relatives were fine, so he should not worry. The protagonist thought that this was surprising. Nariel said a few minutes earlier that they evacuated the relatives and friends of the forge workers because Atla was supposed to target them. He thought that they could be relied on. Then, Kale sadly asked where they should go now. The princess approached him and asked how about the second continent. In 4 days, the royal airship should meet them. He said, if they do not mind. She smiled and said, of course not. They will always be glad to the workers of the Steel Heart. He extended his hands to her and thanked her. He will do whatever she wants. She waved her hands and said that she cannot use his labor. Then he asked if there was one more thing he could ask for. That they needed a place to work. Before they went to the second continent, there was a blade he had to make, a mistletoe blade for Cain. The blade's name was Mistletoe. He would make it in 4 days, an abandoned factory near Barakal. Sia said that this abandoned factory was the only place they could offer the blacksmith. Nariel said that once they reached the capital, they could set up a new workshop for him. The princess asked if they had managed to contact her brother. She said it was difficult to contact the first prince directly. They could try using the other terminals. The princess said that it was too risky, and they didn't know for sure which of the 13 with access to the terminals could be Atla's spy. The bodyguard asked in surprise, "Is one of them a spy?" There are 13 beings who have access to the terminals. In addition to the prince, there are 7 great guardian knights, 2 supreme warriors, and 3 high-ranking officials. All of them are the elite of the kingdom, having served the current Beast King for over 20 years. Sia said that only they know that her power is manifested through unique mana. Therefore, even if it takes time, it is necessary to contact someone who cannot be a spy. Namely, the future successor of the Beast King and her older brother. The bodyguard said that she will try to contact him tomorrow. The princess said that she relies on her, and then said that she is worried about who Kane really is, and that top-class artifact, the Mimic. Nariel said that she herself does not know, but she is sure that he is not an enemy, and she is very lucky to have made an alliance with him. The princess agreed with her and said that he couldn't be a bad person. She thought that she was sure that he wasn't a villain, but what had entered his body then? 4 days later. The protagonist thanked Nariel for her efforts and said that her traps had been very helpful. She said that she didn't expect that they would fall for it so easily. Then the princess called her and said that they were leaving. After that, she approached the protagonist and said that she would like him to go with them, but they would be parting for a short time. The protagonist said that they could take their time. Nariel said that that wouldn't do. If they didn't arrive in time, he would deal with everything alone. He said that they were overestimating him. He couldn't handle it alone, so he would just wait for them. Kale approached him and said that he already knew this, but he couldn't touch the sword until it was fully ripe. He said he would keep that in mind. The blacksmith then apologized for the wait. The protagonist said he was grateful that everything had ended well, and there was no need to apologize. He had fulfilled his dream. He should take care of himself when he reached the second continent. Kale thanked him in return, and added that he had fulfilled his dream too. Sometime later, the landing site of the airship heading to the second continent. Nariel said that the continent had arrived on time, and then turned around to see an arrow flying towards the princess. Worriedly, she called out to her, jumped forward and knocked her down in the side. Jay and his minions were sitting on the branches of a tree, and he said that they were here. Sia said that the information had leaked out after all. Then they came down from the trees, and he said that they could not ignore the fact that they had taken the people from Steelheart, but they needed to find out what would happen to them. Then, turning to his subordinates, he told them to start the columns. The princess was scared, thinking, "Is this a circulation suppressor?" Then she told everyone else that they brought a circulation suppressor. Now it will be completely blocked, and then powerful waves burst out of the columns, and the bandits asked in surprise, "Is it really not working?" If they use this, they will not even be able to get up. Jay shouted, "Do they not know why it is not working? Because now they are not using the circulation. Without it, they are like a tiger without teeth." His subordinate said that he should have said this in advance. And then he ran forward, holding his sword in front of him, and shouted that they must get rid of them right now. Nariel stepped forward and said that she would hold them off, and the princess along with the masters and soldiers should flee. But Sia ran out in front of her and said that she should retreat. She would buy them time. Unlike them, this suppressor does not work on the magic circle. Then she threw the magic seals forward, summoning a protective circle and a black turtle. The bodyguard shouted in surprise, why did she resort to the power of one of the 4 deities? She said that it would never let them go further. At this time, the protagonist sat in front of the sword and thought, how long will this take? He can't wait here for a whole month. Then he turned his attention to the black wolf sword and said that he should return it to Nariel. But he can't leave Mistletoe here either. What should he do? At this moment, the princess diligently maintained the barrier. Jay hit himself on the head and said that if he let her escape, he would definitely be killed. The airship is about to arrive. He will have to retreat, right? What does the princess think? At this moment, a ladder was lowered from the airship, and they shouted for them to quickly climb. After a while, Nariel shouted to the princess that everyone had managed to get on board. It was time for them to leave. Jay laughed and said that she wouldn't be able to hold the magic circle if she was too far away. Great, self-sacrifice. Better to catch her than have them all cut down. A good plan, don't you think? The bodyguard shouted at her to dispel the circle now. She would delay them and buy time, and she would be able to get on board. Sia said that she would use the power of the order, although she promised never to resort to it. and order is a word that cannot be resisted, regardless of desire. Nariel always obeyed any of her princesses. She swore to listen to her always. She swore on the blood of Bestorin when she became a member of the Beast King's guard. Nariel began to protest, but the princess ordered her to leave her and run away from here as fast as she could. The bodyguard repeated the order with tears in her eyes and then ran away. Sia thought that she had every right to be angry with her, but she was glad that she met her. Jay looked at the airship rising into the sky and said, "What a touching scene." She didn't need to be sad. They would meet again soon. Now all she had to do was wait for the barrier to fall. So she was exhausted. They would escort her to safety. At that moment, the protagonist's blade pierced Jay's head, and the princess thought that it was the Black Wolf's sword. Where did this come from? The protagonist picked up the princess and said that she needed to rest for a while. The Atlas members cried out in fear. Was the captain dead? And the protagonist said that he was always amazed that even they had some kind of friendly bonds with each other. Why did this world need them anyway? What was the meaning of their existence? He thought that fortunately, the blade of the Black Wolf's sword was not damaged. One of the minions ran at him holding a sword in front of him, and the protagonist said that he really didn't understand. Then he swung his sword, cutting the enemy's body in half. The others looked at him in fear, and then, swinging their weapons, everyone ran to attack. MC said that the only thing they could do that was useful for this world was to leave it as soon as possible. After that, he swung his sword again and cut his opponents. The remaining bandits also ran to fight, and a few moments later the protagonist's sword was destroyed, and he said that it didn't last long. After 100 swings, it broke. After that, he threw the sword and, picking up the princess in his arms, thought that she was very tired. It was necessary to find a safe place where they could rest and heal their wounds. At that moment, Van grabbed his worker by the throat and asked, "Did she fail to catch the princess?" She said she was very sorry, and then he let her go and said he was waiting for an explanation. She said someone strong protected her. He would understand once he saw it. She had equipped the squad members with mana radars in case of emergency. Van took the item in his hand and thought that exactly one squad member died every second, but the radars did not detect mana. He asked what rank this radar was. She said it was A rank. She added that she only knew of 3 people who could not be measured by a radar of that rank. The sword god of the 4th continent, Reinhardt, the first king of the 1st continent, and the boss of their organization. Based on this, it can be assumed that they are dealing with an enemy equal in strength to the sword boss and the boss. Perhaps Reinhardt is currently somewhere in the central continent. Van thought in surprise, are they dealing with the king of the 1st continent? After some time, Sia woke up on the ground. Raising herself, she asked, "Where is she? Did they take her with them?" In her mind, she asked Nariel not to blame herself. As soon as she returned to her homeland, the order would be automatically lifted. Then bad thoughts appeared in her head, and throwing them away, she thought that she would not do something so unreasonable to herself. She wants to believe it. Then, getting to her feet, she cried and, listing dear people, began to apologize. At that moment, the main character approached her and asked, so she had already woken up? He fell asleep and did not even notice. She thought in surprise, was she dreaming? He asked how she felt. Although he provided first aid, he needed to check her temperature. After that, he put his hand on her forehead, and she embarrassedly thought that his palm was warm. This is definitely not a dream. Then she covered her face with her hands and cried even harder. He sat down in front of her and asked if she was in pain. Then he handed her the elixir and told her to drink it. She thought it was a legendary elixir that could even bring the dead back to life. Just from the glow, all her pain disappeared. She waved her hands and said that she couldn't accept such an expensive thing. Cain thought, isn't now the best time to give it? He remembered his grandfather saying that when he came to her to find out his fate, he should give her this elixir as an offering. Then he said that if she needed the elixir, she should just say so. She agreed with him and said that he saved her again. She didn't know how to thank him anymore. Then she screamed in fear. Where is his sword? The protagonist reached out to the mimic and said that he took it with him. The mimic absorbed it, but he didn't think that being in its throat counted as a human touch. Then she asked if he could show her mistletoe. The box opened, and he said that he did not know if the sword was damaged. Sia noticed the glow. At this moment, the blacksmith on the airship approached Kale and asked why he was sighing so much. He replied that it was all his fault. If the sword did not require maturation, Cain would not have had to wait so long, hiding in an abandoned factory. The guy asked if it was really such a difficult process. He said that in theory, it was not difficult. Maturation is the process of absorbing mana. The more mana the sword absorbs, the stronger it will become. If you put it in an environment where the mana concentration is 5 times higher than usual, The sword will be reborn as a true divine sword. At this time, Sia asked if this was good or bad. The protagonist said that he did not know, but it seemed to him that the maturation process was not disrupted. He thought that in the body of the mimics, the mana concentration was 10 times higher than in the external environment. Perhaps due to this, the process was accelerated. And then he closed the mimic and said that they could go now. She asked where. He said that if she wanted to suddenly attack Atla, then this was their chance. The central continent was empty now. They wouldn't have a better moment. She asked how he knew there was no one. He said that if at least one of the Atla leaders was here, support would have arrived immediately after the attack on the airship was repelled. Most likely, the main forces were outside the continent. She thought about it and said that this was logical, and then he suggested going to their headquarters and collecting all the necessary information. Extending his hand to her, he said that he was counting on her help. At this time, at the Atla base, observing Barakal, the man, turning to his subordinates, shouted that they should immediately go to the landing site of the airship and look for traces of the princess. They agreed with him, and then he thought that if he did not find her within 3 days, he would be killed. At that moment, the protagonist looked at the security camera and thought, disabling the camera with a magic circle. Thanks to Sia's abilities, they still haven't been caught, and yet she is very talented. Peeking out from around the corner, she said that they were leaving. Then they stepped forward, and the protagonist with a sharp movement pulled the sword out of its sheath, and then, swinging, cut the opponents in front of him. He thought that this sword did not last more than a couple of seconds. The man ran out to them and shouted, "What are they yelling about here?" Then he turned his attention to the princess and shouted, "Did she come to surrender herself?" At that moment, the protagonist turned around and swung his fist, but stopped the blow a millimeter from his face when Sia shouted for him to stop. They could interrogate him. She attached a seal to his forehead and told him to say the code on the panel. He answered, DRO67K. After some time, the protagonist had already entered the desired password and said that he was in. Looking at the screen, the princess asked, "Is this a report on the progress of seizing power on the continents?" He said that the progress was displayed in percentages. The percentage of seizing power on the first continent was 99%. To think that the unified kingdom built by his grandfather, Reinhard von Euclid, had fallen in just a measly 14 years. What the hell was he doing, father? He said angrily that he would personally bite his throat when he saw it. Sia looked at him in fear, and he apologized and said that as soon as he saw the percentage of seizing power on the first continent, his emotions got the better of him. She said that everything was fine and she understood him. It was scary even to look at how much influence they had achieved. And the rest? He said that the percentage of seizing power on the third continent was 11%, on the fourth continent, 38%, on the second. She said for him, 38%. She put her finger on the screen and said that it seemed like the Bistoran royal family was safe. After all, it wasn't her brother. He asked if she suspected the first prince of something. She said that only she, Nariel, and the elder brother knew about the operation to return to her homeland, and she was glad that she was wrong. He said that he wouldn't be so calm if he were her, since Nariel doesn't know what they just saw. Once she returns to the Beast King on the second continent, she will report that the elder brother is a traitor. Once the king locks the first prince in the dungeon, tensions will begin to mount within the royal family. If that happens, the family will let down their guard, and the Atlas will take advantage of this to seize power. She asked fearfully, but what should they do? They can't contact their father right now. He said that they will go to the central shelter for that. She said that it is the largest headquarters of all, with hundreds of soldiers. Kane said that they had no other choice. They had to stop Nariel and take her terminal to communicate with the king. She said that they had to hurry then. There were 2 hours left before the airship arrived at its destination. Sometime later, in the central shelter of Atla, the commander was shouting at his employees they still hadn't found anything. One of the workers said that all efforts were being directed towards the search. They needed a little more time. He indignantly shouted that they had an hour at most, until he arrived at the central continent. The subordinate anxiously asked, who was he hinting at? Then the doors of the room opened and several more subordinates ran in. One of them shouted, "Captain, did you call?" The captain shouted, "What were they doing here, and why did they leave the guard post?" The worker replied that he himself had sent a message about the attack and ordered them to come down here. He asked in surprise, "Did he order it?" The protagonist approached the door and said that it was better to gather all the scum in one place than to run and look for them throughout the entire mission. Everyone turned their attention to him. They were surprised. Who was he? He said that he was their doom. Then the lights went out in the room, and Sia said that she turned off the power and activated a paper amulet that enhanced the sensory sensations he had. He thanked her, and then the captain shouted at his subordinates not to panic. He was alone. They would overwhelm him with numbers. Well, before he could finish speaking, the protagonist hit him in the face with a rare punch, which sent him flying to the side. The subordinates looked around in fear, while the protagonist threw them in different directions with his fists. Then he picked up a sword and said that it sounded pretty strong, and he would try it in action. The Atlas member screamed in fear for him not to do this. He had a family. At this moment, the princess watched what was happening and thought that at Kane's request, she used the auditory hallucination magic circle to gather all the soldiers in one place. But right now, he looks like a maniac who revels in killing people. It turns out that she didn't imagine it. Coal black, is this the fate of Mr. Kane? If you remember, Rollins' house looked like a real massacre. Then this is true? At this moment, the protagonist, grinning, said that they thought a little with their heads since they decided to quiet down and hide at once. He praises them. Looking for them in the dark is quite tiring, and he offers a deal. He will spare the life of the first one, who sincerely begs for forgiveness. The next moment, the remaining workers began to ask for forgiveness, and he said that he thought to spare the life of the first one who asked for forgiveness, but he did not expect that all three of them would turn to him. Then he will have to kill them. Then he walked forward and cut their bodies with one swing of his sword. Wiping the sweat from his face, he said, "Finally, that's it." He thought that it was hard for him to fight in the dark, relying only on his hearing. Sia's paper amulet didn't help at all. She said that with this amulet, he would be able to see in the dark. He thought that there was no problem with that. Perhaps it was activated by a person's mana? He would have to ask her. Then he walked to the exit and saw his companion. Sia said that she didn't know how to beat around the bush, so she would ask directly, "Did he enjoy killing others?" He answered that it was not so, and she shouted that it was a lie. He gave these people hope and took it away with pleasure. He said that she misunderstood, but at that moment, Van approached them, directing his attention to the princess. He asked what she was doing here. Infiltrating the central shelter, he would punish them for their overconfidence. He would tear them to pieces. He swung his arm and then sent a powerful electrical pulse straight at the protagonist. MC thought he wanted to get rid of him and then grab her. There was a small explosion and Sia called out to the protagonist in fear. Van smirked and told her not to worry. She was a pretty useful pawn and he wouldn't kill her right away. The protagonist stood up at that moment and, breaking out of the smoke screen, said that given his title as the Thunder Emperor, it made sense that his attacks would be lightning-based, but he was also quite confident. With one powerful blow, he sent the enemy flying into the wall, destroying it. Sia asked if it was over. He took out his mimic and said that unfortunately it wasn't, so she needed to put this on. He opened the chest and found the Sun La de Piraten von Bistoren. She said in surprise that it was the sacred relic of the first Beast King. Where did he get this? He remembered his grandfather's words when he told him that he had stolen this relic a long time ago to protect him, and he would have to return it to Sia. The sacred relic of the first Beast King, capable of awakening the blood of Bistoren. By wearing this tiara, she would become the strongest fighter in the history of the Bistoren family. Kane said that he would explain everything later. The main thing is that she did it. She took the relic in her hands and said that she did not understand why. He said that after defeating him, he would most likely lose consciousness, and she would have to protect him until he woke up. At that moment, Van began to rise from the floor and said that he would kill them. Then the protagonist shouted that she needed to hide now. Van stood up and shouted at the top of his lungs that he would not let them escape. The protagonist tried to hurry his companion, and she ran away and apologized. A bolt of lightning flew at the protagonist, but he held his sword out in front of him, dodging the attack. Wong got angry and shouted that he would crush him into dust. The protagonist dodged and moved forward, saying that he was curious about how strong the 8th rank was, but in the end, it was nothing. These words made the opponent even more angry, and he swung his fist, but the protagonist grabbed his fist and said, "Lightning clenched in a fist, original." Wong was surprised that he stopped. And the protagonist said that he seemed to not understand the difference. So he would clarify, real strength is not just mindlessly swinging fists. He then swung his fist and with a sharp movement hit the opponent in the stomach, causing him to double over in pain and fly back, and the protagonist added, "This is what real strength is." He hoped that he learned his lesson. At this moment, Sia reached a safe place and thought that she had returned to the control room while breathing heavily. But could she really use the relic? If it rejected her, it would end badly. Then she heard a sound, and at that moment, workers were running down the corridor. They were shouting that all the security systems were turned off. One of them shouted that he would go to the control room and the rest should deal with the intrusion. Sia thought that she didn't have time to worry about this. She had to put on the tiara right now. After which, she put the relic on her head and remembered her father's words that the shrine of the first Beast King was both a blessing and a curse. If the chosen ones put on the relic, it would grant great power, but if he was not chosen, it could cost his life. She said that she was sure that she would die. If she really was the chosen one, she would not be so weak. She is useless. She is only strong on the full moon, but she must keep the promise she made to Cain. Bistoran's blood is soaked in devotion, sacrifice, and loyalty. She was betrayed, sacrificed her body, and swore loyalty. She will be blessed. Then she thought about what she saw. Thunder Emperor Wang was dead. Cain was unconscious. She had to destroy the enemies and take Cain to safety. One of the employees turned to his subordinate and shouted that he would go first. He had to cover him. He agreed with him, and then he ran ahead and said that there was no one here. But the next moment, Sia hit them with such force that they fell to the ground, and she said that 2 were done, 10 to go. At that moment, the protagonist had a dream in which he said that this world rightfully belongs to him. And that means that they, the dirty thieves, are trying to steal from him. The fairest thing would be to destroy them all. Sia said that she could only sympathize. She felt sorry for those who had no choice but to become villains. She would kill him here and now. He smirked and told her not to make him laugh, the 37th Beast King. They, the thieves, were the only ones who would die today. Sia then put her hand forward, calling her army to attack, and many beastmen rushed into battle. Cain spread his arms out to the sides and said that he would see what they could do. The battle began, and Sia, taking up her sword, shouted, "Tyrant Cain! Why did he use his power like this?" Then her sword pierced the protagonist's chest and he fell to the ground. Looking up, he said that he had lost. The end was the same as always. What kind of dream was this? At this time, the guys were in a cave. The princess, looking at him, thought that he had not yet come to his senses. Nariel will arrive at the second continent in 4 hours, and the communication device is broken. She hopes that it is not Adal's doing. Walking to the exit of the cave, she said that she needs to get some fresh air. When she went outside, she looked at the moon and thought, crescent moon. But why does it feel like it is a full moon? Could it be that because of the shrine, her blood can awaken even without a full moon? She needs to check this. Then she looked in the mirror and thought that her eyes really did change. The problem that had been tormenting her all her life was solved so easily. At that moment, Starfish, one of Adal's leaders, the first rank, appeared next to her. He said, "Nice weather, huh?" She looked at him in surprise, and he said that it reminded him of that day. She asked why he was here. He walked forward and said that he heard that Thunder Emperor Wang had died. Where was Reinhardt? She asked why he thought the first king of the first continent was here. He said that Wang, the 8th rank, died an extremely horrible death. As far as he knew, there were only 3 people who could kill him like that. The boss of his organization, the sword god of the 4th continent, and finally the founder of the United States, Reinhardt. And the only one whose whereabouts he doesn't know is Reinhardt. So he's definitely here. She said that he misunderstood. The person he's looking for isn't here. He said that they were working together, so she might not know. He gave her a fake name. It seemed like he didn't trust her. He waved his hand and said that she should get out of here. She was in his way. With a wave of his hand, she was sent flying, crashing into a rock, and Starfish walked up to the entrance of the cave and shouted, "Reinhardt, he must come out. He's been dreaming of this day for 20 years. Today will be his revenge. He must die." Then he created a spear and swung it. Sia thought that she had to stop him. Cain was still inside. Then she took out the seals, and he turned around and shouted at her to stay out of his way. Then he pointed his spear at her, and she thought that she had barely managed to dodge it. If it weren't for the shrine, she would have died already. She needed to get up, but her body wouldn't obey. Then he summoned his spear and grabbed it, saying that she was pretty good for being able to avoid his blow, but he wasn't interested in her at all. Then he threw the spear forward again. Sia desperately said that he trusted her, asked her to protect him, and in the end, a pile of rocks blocked the entrance to the cave, and the starfish asked, "No reaction? Someone who can kill the Thunder Emperor shouldn't die so easily." Sia stood up and said that she would kill him no matter what methods she had to use, and no matter what it cost her. She ran forward, and he in turn created many spears around himself, pointing them at her, and said that she suddenly became stronger. Did he make her angry? He doesn't have time to mess with insects. She just needs to die. Then he pointed many spears at her, and she, trying to dodge, thought that all her strength was spent just dodging. He asked, was she able to dodge? But the time for games was over. She really got on his nerves. He took another spear, and then looked at the mountain of stones in surprise. The protagonist destroyed this, apologizing, said that he was really in a bad mood. He had a long nightmare, and he really needed to splash out his irritation on something. The starfish said, "He is Reinhardt's grandson. Why is he here? Didn't he kill him?" The princess called the protagonist anxiously. The starfish thought that this was impossible. Could it be that the priestess gave them the packed information? She said that Cain was killed by his own grandfather. He thought that it couldn't happen. The Euclid kingdom declared him dead. If that's true, then Reinhardt is lying to his own people too? His fists shook with rage, and he said that he was leaving. He hadn't disappeared from view because of guilt over killing his own grandson? That's it. He got it. He lied to protect him. He came just in time. He had just come up with a great plan for revenge. He would cut off his head and present it to Reinhardt. He then created a drill in his hands, and the protagonist said that it was noisy. It was the same with that thunder bastard. Were everyone like that in Atla? He asked, so he was the one who killed the Thunder Emperor? Sia, watching this, thought that if this continued, Cain would be in danger. She took out her talismans, but the protagonist told her to run to safety. He thanked her for protecting him throughout this time. She thought that he was right. If she stayed, she would only be a burden. She should trust him like last time and wait. She said that she would wait for him to return. The starfish said that this was the wrong choice. He would never defeat him alone. The protagonist smirked and said that the Thunder Emperor also said such nonsense. He wanted to die like him? Is that what he meant? He spread his arms out to the sides, creating many weapons, and shouted, if he thought it was possible, then he should try. He then pointed the weapon at the protagonist, but he easily cut through several of them, and then noticed that his sword seemed to be melting. He thought that he was trying to absorb his sword by melting it. At that moment, he lost his balance, and the spear grazed his chest. He leaned on the ground and his opponent laughed, shouting that this was his power. Metal Carnage. This is the ability to absorb metal. Anything that falls into the metal category becomes the power of the starfish. The protagonist covered his wound with his hand and thought that the bleeding did not stop. He asked if he could also affect the metal in his blood. The opponent replied that he was quite smart. He couldn't believe that such an ability existed. Huh? He had gained this power to kill Reinhardt, the swordsman who split the sky. The protagonist thought that it was some kind of side effect of the seabed shrine that he had absorbed. The only difference was that it didn't destroy the metal, but absorbed it. Given the speed of destruction, he wouldn't be able to destroy the spear while he was being attacked. In that case, the only thing he could do was attack first. At that moment, he appeared behind his opponent and swung his fist, but he said that it was useless and created a huge spiked metal ball. The protagonist jumped back, and the starfish, who was inside the ball, said that his ability could be used for both defense and offense. A warrior using metal would never be able to defeat him. MC thought it was a nasty ability, but he was sure there was a weak spot somewhere. Then, he noticed the silhouette in the ball and smiled and said he got it. He adjusts the strength of each section of the protective layer by manipulating metals, right? The opponent said that even knowing that he only needs 0.1 seconds to do this, he can't break through it. The protagonist asked if he should try, and then he jumped off the ground and jumped around in different directions at lightning speed, and then he found what he needed. Then he swung his fist and with a sharp blow destroyed the weak spot, hitting the opponent right away, causing him to fly back. The starfish stood up, dusted himself off, and said, if the sword doesn't work, he'll use his fists, right? Not a bad choice, but his body is like metal. He doesn't take any damage from blunt objects. MC thought, if neither the sword nor the fists work, then his weak spot is related to magic? Now he had almost no mana left. It couldn't be helped. He would try this since there was no other choice. He then took out the mimic and opened it, thinking, this is the sign Kale spoke of. The sword inside glowed, and he thought, it's finally ready. He picked up mistletoe, the divine sword. His opponent asked, what kind of trash is this? He said it was a secret weapon he saved to kill him. He asked in surprise, he wanted to kill him with this? Considering a stick as his secret weapon? How pathetic. He would tear him to pieces. He then created many weapons again and sent it forward. The protagonist waved his hand, destroying his spears, and said that he would regret this. The starfish shouted, his silver spears were destroyed by a wooden sword? The protagonist said that it was too early to be surprised because he was going to cut off both of his arms. At that moment, he got close enough to his opponent and cut off his arms with sharp movements. He shouted indignantly, how is this possible? The protagonist jumped back and asked, how does it feel? How does it feel to have his arms cut off with a wooden sword? The opponent asked, is the sword magical? The price for using magical swords can vary greatly. Judging by the terrifying speed, he would guess that he paid for it with his life. The secret weapon implies that he exchanged his life for that special attack? The protagonist said that he got it wrong. It is not a magical sword. His opponent shouted at him not to make fun of him. This is the end. He released a powerful energy from his hands, directing it at the protagonist. And he swung the sword and said, "Did he know?" He never fought at full strength because there was no sword that could withstand his power. That is why he is so excited now. For the first time he can swing his sword without worrying about it breaking. So he asks that he endure at least one blow. Then he gave a few powerful blows and moved forward, sighed and said, "So this is how it feels to fight without holding back." Then he looked up at the sky and thought that his grandfather once said that swinging a sword is fun. Until now he didn't understand what he meant, but now he did. In any case, he must have some information. After examining the body, he thought, bingo. He took out the data chip and thought that he should output the data. Everything was swimming in front of his eyes, probably because he lost a lot of blood. His body began to stagger. And at that moment, the princess ran up to him, shouting in alarm, "Is he bleeding? Are the wounds serious?" He said that she was just in time. He handed her the chip and then lost consciousness, after which he fell into sleep again. There he laughed loudly and shouted that he finally broke the balance of the world. What a magnificent century. Disagree, Miss Light who pursues the truth? Serena Soret, the light who pursues the truth, told him to shut his mouth. They would kill him and return the world to normal. He should just stand there and let her beat him to death. He smirked and asked, would she kill him? She should try. He then got into a fighting stance and she shouted to her subordinates, "Forward. This is the final battle." She armed herself with a huge machine gun. After a while, she opened her eyes lying on the ground and asked why the hell did they all have to die because of a moron like him. She desperately shouted that if she could turn back time, she would have killed him from the start. At that moment, MC sat up in bed looking around. He thought, is this a hotel? He glanced at his companion, who was dozing at the table, and thought that it seemed like the shrine had taken root properly. That was good. Was it she who bandaged him? He had faced some really strong enemies, but he still couldn't believe that he had fainted twice in a row. And then there was this damn dream. It was similar to the one he had last time, only with new details. He wondered if this was the future that awaited him. He was destined to destroy the world, no matter what decisions he made. So how the hell was he supposed to live now? At that moment, Sia woke up and asked anxiously what time it was. The protagonist said that he could see that she was awake. Had she managed to contact the second continent? Holding the terminal in her hand, she said that it wasn't so. She thought Atla had made it so that none of the communication codes would work. This was after they had worked so hard to acquire this communication device. What should they do? If they didn't have the code to connect, there was no way they could contact them. He thought that even if she arranged for an airship right now, they wouldn't make it in time. Getting out of bed, he thought that it couldn't be helped, and then told her to lend him that device. She asked what code he was using. He said that she would figure it out soon. At that moment, the king answered and said that he didn't think that he would actually contact him. Wasn't he being too casual about him? The princess wondered, was that her father's voice? The king was shouting, why didn't he say anything? Reinhardt, he had to answer him. At that moment, in the palace in the capital of the second continent, Circassia, the king asked what he was thinking. How could he steal their shrine? He even left that ominous letter. Reinhardt wrote that he would borrow the shrine for a while, he would return it later, so he must take good care of the communication device. The king was shouting for him to answer. Sia called him and asked if he could hear her. He asked why she had that terminal. She said she would explain everything later. Was he alone now? He said no one was around. She said no one could hear this. After a while, the king grabbed his head and asked if Atla was already preparing to attack them. What a worthless king he was for not noticing this sooner. Well done, Sia. She did a good job. She said she was not the only one who found out about this. At that moment, the protagonist shut her up and she said that her older brother was definitely not a traitor, so there was no need to put him in prison. The king said he understood and she didn't have to worry about it. Just leave it to him. But how did she get her hands on that terminal? The protagonist whispered to her to think of something. She tried to find the words, but, burning with shame, she hung up. The protagonist thought that he couldn't tell the Beast King that the grandson of the first king stole it. He thought that they had managed to trick him this time, but it seemed like it was time to talk to the fortune teller not only about the relic, but also about the truth. After a while, she said in surprise, so he is the grandson of the first king? He confirmed it. She said that now that he told her, they really did look alike. She felt like they knew each other. He thought that he was sure that his grandfather had shown himself to her on purpose. And then she asked, But couldn't she just explain this to her father? He wasn't the one who stole the relic. I mean, he even plans to get it back, right? He said that it was better not to mention it. The Beast King is known for his short temper and willingness to swing his fists. He would definitely try to send him to the afterlife once he found out that he stole it from him. Anyway, what did she do with the starfish chip? She inserted the chip into the tablet and said that there was a lot of information on it. Looking at the image that appeared, the protagonist thought, isn't this the light that seeks the truth? She is another of the 3 constellations that he is closely related to. She is also known as the Witch of the Third Continent. But why is there a witch on the starfish chip? The screen said, Witch of the Third Continent, name, Serena Soret, born in the slums, master of the mechanical tower in the capital Metatron, importance, critical. He thought, why would they investigate her? As far as he remembers, she should only appear in 7 years, and she is the master of the mechanical tower. It seems his grandfather said that she will take up the position in 10 years. Then he saw the information that he is dead. He remembered the words of the starfish and thought that the witch was the one who told him about it. What happened here? But he does not have time to dwell on it. He will just copy everything. Sia looked at the screen in surprise and shouted, the third continent's takeover percentage is 0%? Does that mean the information they got from the Atla base in Barakal was wrong? MC said that it was. He thought the starfish probably had more up-to-date data, and it seemed like they had recovered all the important equipment that Atla had stolen from them. She saw that they even got the ampoule factory back 3 hours after they took it over. She said, but who could fight them back? It would be almost impossible if they didn't know the future and didn't plan for it. The protagonist thought, could it be Grandpa? He didn't think he would interfere with something like that. The princess asked, what should they do now? He said that they first need to eliminate the remaining bosses and return to the central continent. After that, they would move on to the other continents. That boss should return to the central continent as soon as he heard about their deaths. He thought, the ultimate boss Atlas, no one knows his name, his age, they don't even know his gender. All they know is that they call him the ultimate and that he wields a powerful weapon. Sia asked if he could fight him. Kane said he couldn't tell for sure until he met him, but he would most likely lose. If they faced him now, he would die. He thought about the note his grandfather left. He wrote that if things were as he wrote, he would die at the hands of Atlas. He called out to Sia and noticed he forgot to give it to her. She gave him this talisman to enhance his senses. Does she remember? She wondered why he still had it. The protagonist explained, honestly, he hadn't activated it. Sia asked in confusion, why? It seemed like the talisman was fine. MC made an excuse and thought it was because he had no mana. But he thought it wasn't worth talking about. He explained that at that moment, all his senses were completely suppressed. Sia pointed out, so that's why he had to use sounds to find the enemy's locations. Let him forgive her? She assumed that he enjoyed killing without knowing what was really going on. MC reassured her, saying that this kind of thing happened more often than she thought. It was late, so they needed to get some sleep and set off early tomorrow. He thought that the Atlas leaders would soon be heading to the central continent. After some time, the worker wrote a report, which stated that this was a report on the destruction of the Atlas Central Shelter and its aftermath. Starfish, the swordsman of the cursed sword, death confirmed. The corpse of Thunder Emperor Wang, rank 8, was found in the central shelter. 4 mid-level executives were dispatched to the crime scene to investigate the destruction of the central headquarters. Halfway through, communication was lost. After receiving confirmation, all those involved in the investigation were declared dead. It was determined that the culprit was the same person who killed Thunder Emperor Wang. The author of this report believes that the incident was not accidental, and therefore, he would like to seek support from the higher-ups. As he was sending the message, the killer called out to him and remarked that if he was alone here, he was unlikely to pose a threat. But if he let him live, it would be a problem. The worker managed to send the message at the last moment before dying. After some time, Saiyan read the report and remarked that it was obvious that all of Atlas's executives were destroyed without much effort. If he was that strong, he should be able to verify it himself. A few days later, at the central port of Sur, the protagonist explained that the rest of the leaders would be arriving at the port. They just needed to be prepared. Sia wondered. She thought they could try to survey the area, but if they disguised themselves, they wouldn't be able to tell them apart. Did he understand? MC explained he would recognize them when he saw them. He wondered, was it because he had a sacred circle? Sia asked, could the circles sense mana? Suddenly, the protagonist felt a powerful aura and wondered. He had felt something like this before. It was an aura like the sun. Is that the sword god and Selene? But the one next to them had a huge swirling black aura that he had never seen before. Why was the sword god communicating with such an evil person? Suddenly, an old man suddenly jumped up to them and remarked, he had already thought that an assassin had come to them in the middle of the night, but it had already been a month, hadn't it? MC turned around and said, he is the one who was watching him in Tenkara. Taimei wondered, is that all he knows about him? He thought, if he has been to the fourth continent, then there is no way he doesn't know about him. What is he planning? He doesn't see anyone suspicious, but if he is not from Atla, then why was he watching them? MC explained, he has no reason to worry. He didn't come here with bad intentions. He was looking for someone and he accidentally caught their eye. Suddenly, Celine jumped in and accused him of being a liar. It's about 3 li from here to the docks. It can't be a coincidence. The protagonist thought, this is the favorite disciple of a sword god, also known to worship martial arts. Along with the fortune teller and the light that strives for truth, she is one of the constellations that are closely related to him, and according to his grandfather, these are the women he is destined to fall in love with. Celine grabbed the sheath and warned, she can't trust their words. They could be from Atla. Seiyan suddenly appeared and MC thought, he has no trace of transformation magic, which is studied by the Jufril school. But if this is his true form, then why doesn't Taimei notice it? How does he manage to hide such a level of anger? Seiyan noted with a smile, she is so impatient. First, it was worth assessing the entire situation. The protagonist thought, is he using some kind of magic that he does not know about? If it is at such a level that even the sword god cannot notice it. He noted that they misunderstood him. Will their suspicions be cleared if he shows them this? MC showed the badge, said his name, and explained that he was Reinhardt's grandson and the first prince of the Euclid kingdom on the first continent. They looked at the emblem in surprise. The sword god pointed out that the badge was real. Is he really Reinhardt's grandson? The protagonist made a face and agreed, noting that he got it from his grandfather. Taimei said that there seemed to be a misunderstanding. There was no way that Reinhardt's grandson was an assassin. Seiyan apologized for being rude with a smile, since it turns out that he was the prince of the Euclid kingdom. He was glad to meet him. MC suddenly attacked and cut off his head. Celine furiously pounced on him and shouted, what did he do? The protagonist parried the attack and explained that the man was not her senior, but Atlas's boss, the Absolute. The sword god intervened in their fight and stopped it, saying that if he had to be killed, he would be the one to do it. So let her not move and do not make him repeat himself. He will ask only once. After all, he does not see any suspicious marks on Seiyan's corpse. How can he prove that his student is the boss of Atlas? MC replied that he cannot explain it. Taimei asked, did he decide to kill him without proof? It is obvious that Reinhardt did not raise his grandson correctly. He will apologize to Seiyan in the afterlife. The protagonist thought in fear, if he cannot stop this, he will be killed. Suddenly his mana began to return and he thought that even if it is a little, but he can follow the sword. MC blocked the attack with lightning speed and thought, this terrifying aura is the same one he felt back in the forest. The sword god retreated in surprise and thought, he managed to stop his sword, this is really an unusual child. He prepared a serious attack, when suddenly Seiyan resurrected and cut off his hand. He called out to the protagonist and warned, his head belongs to him. MC remembered the dialogue with his grandfather, saying that on the central continent there is a huge criminal organization called Atla, and no one knows anything about the ultimate, their boss. Neither about the abilities nor the goals of this organization. He wondered if there are things that even he does not know. Riefenhardt explained that the ultimate was a being that should never have appeared in his future. He is sure that this is an inevitable consequence of his destiny being distorted. So let him be careful. Perhaps he has some unusual abilities that he knows nothing about. The protagonist thought, thanks to his grandfather's advice, he was able to see the one called the ultimate. To disguise himself, he used some power that he does not know about, but who would have thought that the ultimate even has the power of immortality? Celine asked fearfully, was he cast a spell? The sword god menacingly noted that he is not Seiyan. The ultimate explained that no, he is the same beloved student whom he trained for 11 years. Be it in the past when he wanted to train so much that he ended up hurting himself. Or 8 years ago, when Celine drew her first map on a pillowcase. Or 11 years ago, when he took him in while he was dying on the side of the road. It was him. It was all just a disguise to prepare for the moment when he would have to kill him. Seiyan grew his head back. Taimei asked in confusion, is this true? So the protagonist really was right all along. He charged at lightning speed, and they began to fight. During the battle, Seiyan remarked that his intuition was amazing. He should have used this to figure out who he was. The sword god was thinking, using a power beyond his understanding. He lost his arm and was no longer able to defeat his student. He shouted that Cain should get out of here. He could buy himself some time. Saiyan pounced on him, but Taimei dodged and said that he trusted his school and the fourth continent to Celine. They started running away from the epicenter of events. The Ultimate One shouted furiously, even if she ran away, he would still find her. The sword god flew up to him with lightning speed and striking, noted that his opponent was him. Saiyan parried the attacks with difficulty and said, "Fight him on equal terms with only the left hand, as expected of a teacher." Taimei furiously jumped on him and pierced him through. The Ultimate One noted with a smirk, as expected of the sword god himself. He thought in bewilderment that he pierced his heart and he still did not die. Is he immortal? Saiyan flew into the air and asked, apparently one sword is not enough. But what will he do now? Will he be able to stop this too? In an instant, a huge meteorite appeared out of nowhere. The sword god thought, 70 years ago, he was also a student. As his teacher said, what truly brings the strong to their doom is not the pursuit of achievement, but women, poison, and carelessness. So he must never let his guard down. What he learned from nearly dying at the hands of his own teacher was to never let his guard down. And he also decided that if he ever had students in the future, he would take responsibility for them. His right hand was the price for his carelessness. It was his duty as Saiyan's teacher to believe in him, and it was his duty as a teacher to eliminate his student. The sword god began to use a technique and shouted to let Celine remember the move he was going to pierce him with. He used the most powerful ability, Slash, and cut the ultimate into two. Celine shouted in delight, he had won. The protagonist grabbed her and warned her, they needed to leave quickly. They started to run and she asked where they were going. MC explained, that guy didn't die. Taimei thought after using the technique that he could no longer sense his presence. Where did he disappear to? Suddenly Seiyun appeared behind him and, preparing a powerful technique, noticed, releasing so much power despite the fact that he only had his left arm left. He turned around in a flash and struck, but the ultimate easily parried the attack with his hand and explained, his sword will not stop him. This magic was created specifically for this. The ultimate struck a powerful blow and tore off his arm, and then noticed that he was still breathing. Did he strengthen his body when the attack began? In that case, he will save him from suffering. He swung his sword when suddenly a blade entered his body. Saiyan grinned and noticed he did not see how she returned. Apparently, she hid her presence with a magic circle. And Sia was here too. She wondered in horror, did all the talismans really burn out at once? The ultimate smirked and noted she could have lived longer if she had run away. Saiyan thought she came back because she believed the words of the man named Cain. She remembered his words, like if he said there was a way to save the life of the sword god and defeat the ultimate, would she take that chance? She wondered, could they really defeat him? Saiyan threw the sword on the ground and said, he didn't think he would rush back himself. Doesn't he want to know why he is chasing him of all people? MC replied, he already knows. He remembered everything when he summoned that meteorite. Memories of his long-forgotten dreams. He wants to become him, the real ultimate, doesn't he? The protagonist thought he had seen countless dreams. In some of them, he went crazy and was called the Destroyer. In others, he was a king. In the rest, he was called the Ultimate. He rained meteorites down on the earth, gained the power of the void, and as the Ultimate, achieved everything with the power of creation. He created an army of living weapons. With the concept of immortality, he became something that simply could not die. With power similar to a god, he pushed the world to the brink of destruction. That same power flowed into this man, and now the Ultimate's power yearns to become his again, as if it wanted to return to its original owner. MC easily grabbed him by the neck and began to absorb the power. Saiyan noted with displeasure his power was flowing into him just by being near him. He jumped back onto the roof and shouted he would tear him to shreds before he could swallow another drop. Ultimate used the ability of the 5th tier magic, life creation, and in an instant, dark spirits appeared. MC cut the spirits apart and mockingly asked, is that all he can do? Suddenly, he noticed that the creatures began to attack again. Saiyan explained, these creatures will not die so easily. He gave them the concepts of immortality and separation. If they are killed or injured, they simply fall apart. This will go on forever, of course. MC thought as he fought, establishing concepts is the final level of creation magic. It allows the user to establish new laws of reality. Normally, he would just have to kill the original body, but if it was immortal. He called out to Sia and asked if she could use the sealing magic circle. She explained, no, it would burn all her talismans. But if he gave her some time, MC agreed and ordered her to leave it to him, and they should just run away. He thought that for now he would just focus on holding out and not increasing the number of these creatures if possible. Suddenly, one of the monsters bit his body. The protagonist fought back and thought, there were more of them, that was the problem. He could feel the power behind the wolves, the 4 energies used to create them. Adi, Koro, Bejane, and Sora. It would shatter his rune structure into tiny pieces. Now he remembered, it was the power that originally belonged to him as the absolute creation. Saiyan noted with displeasure, he was even sucking the power out of the life forms he created. But that still wouldn't change anything. He really didn't know that his mana was the problem? They say that when he looks into the abyss looks back at him, right? Just like he learned to understand it, he learned to understand it too. MC thought he was right, he didn't have enough mana. He could only neutralize its magic a few more times. If he could hold out until the sword god healed, they might have a chance. Saiyan warned, if he waited for the sword god, it was useless. The magic he used against him was based on the concept of death. Right now, he was reviving and dying over and over again. He would probably disappear forever once the potion wore off. MC thought he couldn't undo the death of the sword god with the mana he had left. Maybe he could change the concept enough for the elixir to work. But first, he had to take care of this guy. Celine suddenly appeared and cut the wolf spirit. She showed him the talisman and pointed out that Sia had already prepared everything, but what about him? MC pointed out that he would give a signal, so they should just wait for his command. As a barrage of creatures rained down on him, he dodged and thought that the weak point of these creatures was the tiny crack that formed when they split. The protagonist raised his sword into the air and launched a powerful attack, causing an explosion. At this time, Sia scattered the talismans and sealed all the spirits. MC thanked her and started to run away quickly. Seiyun ran after him in displeasure when suddenly Silin cut off his hand with lightning speed. The Ultimate One furiously dealt a powerful charge of energy and ran towards the protagonist. At this time, the protagonist began to suck out the curse from the sword god. Saiyan grabbed his hand and noted that it seemed he had won. The Ultimate One thought in fear, is he not dying, but rather absorbing his power? 15 years ago, when he gained the power of the Ultimate One, naturally he learned about the true owner of this power. The true Ultimate One is Cain. And if he leaves him alive, his power will soon return to him. And in order to prevent this, he has no choice but to kill him. At that time, he founded the Atla organization and spread its information network across all the continents. And all this in order to find him. Since then, he has dedicated 10 years of his life to destroying him. Does he really have no chance to defeat him? He needs to leave before he takes all of his power. He used the ability of the 4th level magic, travel in the subspace. The sword god calmly apologized because he will not let him leave so easily. He cut it with the sword and said, he realized that the boundaries between life and death do not exist, and if so, then it is only natural that there is none between space and time. If there are no boundaries in this world, then there is nothing that the sword cannot cut. Saiyan thought fearfully, did he strike even when he crossed into the subspace? If he is telling the truth, then it is dangerous, he needs to leave here. Only after he erases their memories. He began to try to use the ability, but MC flew into the air and remarked that he was a foolish thief who dared to covet his power. He will assign a punishment corresponding to his sins. He pointed his finger at him and used the technique of creating a blazing hell. In an instant, everything around was covered in pillars of flame. Saiyan screamed in fear. Did he just create the world? This is impossible. This can't be. The protagonist appeared next to him in an instant and said, this is impossible for him. An imposter who can't use even half of his power. He grabbed his face and began to suck out all his strength. In the end, Saiyan knelt down and thought, no matter how hard he tried, in the end, this is his fate. He began to laugh hysterically and screamed, he will regret taking back the fate of the Absolute, which he tried so hard to get rid of. With this power, he will not be able to escape the fate of the Absolute, because this is a curse. Let him not think that this is the end of it. Saiyan brought his fingers to his temple and in an instant dissolved into ash. MC, watching the ashes, noted what stupid last words. He sank into consciousness, and the darkness ordered him. Let him not reject it. The darkness is him, let him take his hand, and then his power will be his. The protagonist noted, he wants to say that the power of creation will be his. Grandfather told him, there is no one who could control his power except him. MC cut off his head in cold blood and he asked why he rejects the power of creation? Hasn't he already accepted it? The protagonist explained, he just borrowed his power for a while to get rid of that guy. Let this plague of the world get out of here, and do not show him this disgusting darkness. The protagonist came out of his consciousness and the fiery world and said that the Absolute is dead. After a while in heaven, Grandfather, looking into the water, noted, so he was not absorbed by his power. It seems that his final choice was still the right one. MC noted, finally he smiled. Nephilim said with a smile, and he and his soul smile beautifully. Grandfather noted, he clearly remembers that he asked to leave him alone. If he can see the expression of his soul, then she was here all this time. She emphasized with a smile, his soul is so vibrant, it is full of colors. She just couldn't leave him alone. Sadness, hatred, joy, regret, but everything turned out well, right? Grandfather agreed. After all, Cain overcame the first mountain. He has no reason to kill this child anymore. He's going to give him his last gift. Nephilim wondered where he was going. She wondered if this man had many secrets. He called out to her and warned her that when the protagonist reaches heaven, he will entrust him to her. She asked, did he tell her all this to leave him in her care? She will properly fulfill her role as Cain's guide. After a while, the protagonist woke up in bed and thought he lost consciousness again, right? It seems they returned his things. A mimic jumped up to him and began to rub against his finger. MC noticed a paper on the table that had a message from his grandfather, saying that if he was reading this, it meant that he had successfully dealt with the ultimate. He had something to say. Let him ask Mimicry to give him TK-331. He placed the words he wanted to convey to him in there. Suddenly, Celine entered the room and asked how he was feeling. He had slept for 3 days. Suddenly, Sia and Taimei flew into the room. He noticed that nothing unusual seemed to have happened. They would get straight to the point. They had witnessed his transformation into the ultimate. Not only his aura, but also the power he used belonged to him. What kind of relationship does he have with the ultimate? MC said that he had changed like this because of the side effect of absorbing the ultimate's mana. The sword god shouted in surprise, did he really absorb the ultimate's mana? The protagonist agreed and explained that it was the main part of his power, although he could not reveal the details. Let them not worry, because the ultimate is dead and his power is exhausted. The sword demon chuckled and remarked, he is sure that he has his own secrets, so it would be impolite to ask questions. Sia thought, Lord Cain's fate looked like this because of the ultimate's mana. Taimei remarked, they have already destroyed Atlas and what was left of it. She added that the spies hiding on the continent have fled, so now the second continent is safe. MC thanked them, because all this happened while he was sleeping. The sword god bowed his head and replied, he is the one who should thank him. Although he is late, he expresses his gratitude. Thanks to him, the entire fourth continent was saved from disaster. Celine confirmed she also thanks him and apologizes for his rudeness. He said that one day he will repay him. He swears on his name and sword. It is late, let him rest. They started to leave the room and the protagonist remarked, let them rest too. After a while, MC turned to Mimic and asked if he could give TK-331 and let him pass him the tablet. He opened the tablet and wondered what his grandfather wanted to tell him. A system window appeared, which said that the virtual space of T22XS33732 was unlocked. The videos saved by the previous user will now be played, playing the fourth world. A video appeared in which grandfather fought. MC thought, this world is also a failure. He could not prevent Cain from awakening as an absolute. It is his fault. They are blood relatives. Because of his childish innocence, he could not bring himself to kill him. His mistake brought this disaster upon them. But next time, he will definitely end Cain with his own hands. After a while, the protagonist turned on the 13th world reproduction, in which the grandfather thought, even if he kills the young Cain, another will appear again. Even taking the life of such a young boy, he will not be able to prevent the collapse. They must find another way out. In the 41st world reproduction, the grandfather, while on the road, thought, how many times has he gone on this journey in search of the truth about the world? At least he found that the three destinies are closely related to Cain. Light, who seeks the truth, who reveres martial arts, and Sia, who sees destinies. Only these three can stop him. In the 71st world reproduction, the grandfather thought that all three succeeded in changing their destinies and killing Cain. Only a few survived, but if they continue, they will definitely find a way to save the world. In the 99th world replay, grandfather thought, after 99 lifetimes, he finally realized, no matter what they do, Cain will stand in their way again with even greater force, as if it were destined by fate. Whether they fight desperately or remain idle, in the end, the world will end on the same day, at the same time. There is not a glimmer of hope for salvation. Are all his efforts in vain? He has one last chance left. In the 100th world replay, grandfather thought, after visiting 99 worlds, he has gained a wealth of experience and knowledge, and now he must make a final decision. He thinks that the best decision is to kill this child. Even if another one appears later, it is better than facing Cain again. He must not hesitate after seeing what a disaster can do to him. He must kill him here and now. At that moment, Cain laughed innocently, like the child he was. In the end, Grandpa said, he would make an outstanding villain. The first continent, then the second, third, and fourth, they would all fall at his feet. Since fate was unavoidable and could not be changed, he would make him a real man. After a while, a system window appeared, saying that all the saved videos had been played. MC wondered, Were these videos recorded in Grandpa's 99 past lives? Was the person he saw in his dreams really him, and not his potential future? How could he let him live knowing all this? The system window said that this was a message left by a previous user. Does he want to play the message? Suddenly, Grandpa's hologram appeared and said, he said that he knew the future thanks to his ability to see fate, but in reality it was because he had lived 99 lives. The reason he kept his reincarnations a secret was for his insurance. If he knew about this fact and tried on the role of a villain again, he wouldn't be able to change anything that time. As long as he wasn't sure that his destiny wouldn't consume him, there was no choice but to keep it a secret. But now he decided that he could trust him with everything. As he had already seen, the destruction of the world was already predetermined. If he escaped the fate of a villain, someone else could take his place and bring this world to destruction in his place. Let them become stronger, defeat the second absolute who would appear again. More precisely, his second. He believes in him. The system windows said that all data had been reproduced. The virtual space was shutting down. After a while, the protagonist, being in the ordinary world, thought about the great villain, destruction, and his destiny. He's the only one who can stop the destruction of this world. The next morning, MC came to the kitchen. He sat down at the table and noticed that they had woken up early. By the way, the sword god was nowhere to be seen. Celine explained that the teacher needed to check something. After a while, he came and noticed that the connection had been restored. A student from the fourth continent had just contacted him. Sia happily said that she would now be able to contact the second. Tai Mei agreed and explained that it would be difficult to talk to the Beast King. She worriedly asked if something had happened on the second continent. He said that he would tell them everything if they were willing to listen. His students heard from the people of the second continent that it seemed that the capital of Circassia and the royal family had fallen. The capital was currently isolated by magic. The connection with the heavenly emperor who had gone to the second continent had been cut off. That was all they knew. Celine noted that the heavenly emperor should go to the second continent himself. The situation must be very serious. Sia asked in horror what she should do. Her family and Nariel, who should have arrived in the capital by now. Perhaps they were already finished. The protagonist reassured her, because the Beast King was not one to give up so easily. Tai Mei confirmed that the rest of her family should be fine too. She knew the Beast King was strong. Still, they had better hurry. Sia asked in surprise, would he come with them too? The sword god inquired. Wasn't that a given? She asked. Shouldn't he solve the sword gate problem first? Tai Mei explained. No, the ultimate was already dead, so there was no need to rush. Salen noted with a smile. Atla had also been destroyed. The protagonist inquired, should they go then? Sia shed tears and thanked them. After a while, they flew away on a flying ship. MC, watching the sword god, thought he had become even stronger than before. He noted that he saw him fight the ultimate. The sword god asked, had he come to his senses at that moment? The protagonist agreed and pointed. He was stunned, but he could see it clearly. It was simply an amazing blow. He seemed to erase the boundaries between life and death, time and space, common sense and nonsense. An incredible blow. The sword god thought in surprise that blow was beyond common sense. Even Celine could not understand it. He noticed, he saw the essence of his sword. So at this age, he already understands the boundary between life and death. MC wondered, is this the name of the new state he created? He asked if he could tell more about this boundary. Suddenly, they saw a large dragon on the horizon. The protagonist said that he heard that they are sometimes seen during travels on an airship. He thought that this is the first and strongest dragon, born together with the world, the heavenly dragon Yahello. He can feel its enormous mana even from here. Suddenly, the others ran out onto the deck and shouted in fear, what kind of mana was that just now? Did they really get attacked? Tai Mei explained, it was a heavenly dragon. Yahello was at their side in an instant, and noted that he was not here to cause harm. He had come to fulfill an old pact with the Beastman family, but he never thought he would find him here, the apostle of the apocalypse. No, should he call him a singularity now? Perhaps that was also fate. They needed to talk together. The dragon stopped time in an instant, and explained that he was now a singularity that had been freed from its shackles. The man born solely to bear the fate of the apocalypse had mysteriously changed. The one who had provided this chance must be the one bound to the shackles. He could not predict whether this chance was a blessing or a curse for future events. In that case, he would watch over them through the eyes of his contractor Sia. Yahello implanted a magic stone into her and told her to awaken. The contractor who had inherited the pact with his old friend. He was originally going to wait until he came to visit him, but he had no choice but to wake her up now. His friend's land, the heaven-blessed land she inherited, was heading towards destruction. If she didn't stop it, everything would be destroyed. She, him, and this land. Let them go to Theolitare no Friction and stop the destruction. Let her use any means necessary to protect this land. Suddenly, there was a powerful flash and the dragon flew away. In an instant, they woke up in a room somewhere. Celine asked, weren't they just on an airship? MC guessed it seemed like the heavenly dragon had transported them. They were ordered to help stop what was happening on the second continent. She asked in confusion, was he talking to the heavenly dragon? The protagonist wondered, didn't she hear him? He wondered, it seemed like not everyone could hear the heavenly dragon's voice. Celine noted, dragons are transcendental beings that don't interfere with the human world. At this time, the residents in the corridor started a dialogue, saying that yesterday a thief broke into the next room. He should also be careful. The main character excitedly suggested getting out of here. They jumped out the window, and after a while, they were walking down the street. Celine asked why they were the only ones here. Where's the teacher and Sia? MC explained that he didn't know either. The most important thing is to meet them. First, they need to find out where they are. She noted that this didn't look like Sorkasi. According to rumors, the continent was isolated, but it was quite peaceful here. The NPC called out to them and offered to try some delicious food. Celine asked what kind of place this was. He replied that it was Sorkasi. How could they not know? Are they really lost travelers? The protagonist called out to her and pointed to the side, noting that it really looked like the capital. She was puzzled and told him that she had heard that Sorkasia had been isolated due to an abnormal mana phenomenon. The NPC suggested that the children were probably spreading strange rumors again. She whispered, what was going on here? The MC suggested asking some more people. Celine thanked the NPC and, moving away from the counter, noted that this guy didn't know anything either. Maybe these were just false rumors? The protagonist said that this information came from the Heavenly Emperor, and most importantly, it was the Heavenly Dragon who had sent them here. He thought about it. The fact that no one knew that the city was isolated was worrying. The matter might be more serious than they expected. The MC suggested that perhaps they had installed a barrier that directly affected the mind, a barrier that prevented people inside from noticing anything unusual. To build a barrier of this scale, it would take at least 500 trained mid-level mages. He thought about it. It was theoretically possible, but mages were rare. There weren't enough of them on the second continent for that. He suggested that she go outside the capital and observe a little more. After a while, they came to the gate. One of the guards said that this area was closed to the public. MC explained that they were looking for a way to get outside the capital. He asked in confusion, is he an idiot? Even if they get out, there's nothing outside. The world is Circassia, and Circassia is the world. All the guards began to repeat the same thing like a flock of sheep, saying that the world is Circassia and Circassia is the world. After a while, they got out into nature and the protagonist climbed a branch. Feeling the air, he noticed that there really was a barrier here, but he couldn't find out the details. First, they need to find Sia and the sword god. Since she's a fortune teller, she should know a lot about barriers. Celine suggested going back to town and checking it out. After some time, they asked an NPC about Sia. He explained that the princess had passed away 10 years ago. An old rat approached them and said that perhaps the person they both knew was the fake princess who had been arrested recently. The MC asked if he could tell them more about it. The old rat explained that the fake princess had managed to get into the castle. He had heard that it was then that the Beast King had ordered her to be arrested and imprisoned. The protagonist thought about it. The memories of all the Beastmen, including the Beast King, had been altered. If they were talking about a fake princess, then it must be Sia. He thanked them and remarked that they would try to look into it to find out the fake princess's plan. After some time, they came to the prison and Celine asked if he was really going to rescue her from there. How did he want to do it? He explained that there was a secret passage. MC pressed a button and, taking out a mimic, used the revelation of Trachopus. In an instant, the chest spat out a key, with which the protagonist opened a secret door. Celine asked in confusion, what kind of key was it? And how did he know that there was a secret passage under the lock? The protagonist explained that the revelation of Trachopus is a divine item that has the ability to connect spaces. It is a secret passage created 10 years ago when they invaded the castle. It creates a void in space where nothing exists. She wondered what it is connected to. MC answered that it is connected to one of the warehouses of Bestoran Castle. They need to go a little further and they will end up in prison. Suddenly, the King of Beasts met them and said that he had a bad feeling, so he came here, but he did not expect to meet thieves. The fake princess they arrested was just a distraction, right? He can handle this alone and let the guards stand guard outside. MC thought, this is the Beast King Leo. Without mana, he can't handle him. He raised his hands and explained that they are not going to fight him. Let him please listen to them. The Beast King rushed to attack with lightning speed and tried to deliver a powerful attack, but the protagonist dodged it in an instant. Leo noted that he has very good intuition. Celine screamed furiously. She can't believe that the Beast King could do such a vile act. He said with a smile, "A thief who dared to break into his castle calls him vile. After living a long life, you can really hear a lot of strange things. He will never forgive these thieves." MC thought, what a powerful circulation he has. This is a special technique used by Beastmen. It allows you to speed up the circulatory system and increase physical capabilities. Leo rushed to attack with a powerful blow. The protagonist thought about it. He can't dodge at this distance, he'll have to block. Now he needs the principles of Bajikwan. You can parry using circular attacks. The protagonist parried the attack and tried to strike back, but the Beast King blocked the blow and mockingly asked, "He managed to penetrate this deep into the castle, but is that all he can do?" Before he gets cocky, he'll show him his true power. Leo pushed him away and struck again with lightning speed. MC tried to block and thought about it. He can't parry consecutive attacks. He has no choice but to take the blow. The Beast King broke his arm and swinging, shouted, "It's over." Suddenly, Celine ordered him to dodge downwards and flew into their brawl, injuring him. The protagonist noted, "It's impossible to fight the Beast King alone." She noted, "Everything is fine, and let him just rest." She jumped on him and tried to strike him with her sword. But Leo blocked the strike and counterattacked. MC thought, most likely, she won't be able to fight on equal terms with him. But still, her swordsmanship has improved so much that she's practically on another level. And on top of that, Celine uses circulation. But that technique is only available to Beastmen. She jumped on the enemy again and dealt a powerful blow. The protagonist wondered if she had been hiding her abilities until now. Celine explained she didn't quite understand either. Suddenly, she felt her body becoming lighter, and she understood how to move correctly. The protagonist wondered why she suddenly awakened. Does it have something to do with the barrier? Leo pointed out that her sword looked familiar. Who taught her? She replied, her teacher is the sword god. His name is Tai Mei. The Beast King said he seemed to have heard that name before. MC wondered if all their knowledge of the continents except the second one had been erased. Leo wondered what relation this sword god has to the Bestoran royal family. The sword she was holding now looked exactly like the royal family's sword that was said to have been passed down through generations. The royal sword of Bestoran that had been lost. And he wanted to know how someone who wasn't related to their family could get it. Suddenly, the sword god himself appeared and remarked, he tried to get here as quickly as possible, but he didn't expect them to get here first.